You know that moment when your whole world shatters and all you can do is smile. That was me at Thanksgiving dinner when my sister Clara stood up, tapped her champagne glass, and announced she was the new CEO of our family company. The company I built from the inside for 12 years while she played office politics and took credit for my work. But that wasn't the worst part. She turned to me in front of our entire family and said with this cold, triumphant smile, "Mom and Dad have decided the company needs fresh leadership. You're terminated, effective tomorrow morning." Everyone expected me to cry, to beg, to fall apart. Instead, I picked up my napkin, wiped my mouth, and said 2 words, "Congratulations, Clara." Then I walked out to my car and made one phone call. See, what my darling sister didn't know, what my parents didn't know, is that I'd been preparing for this exact moment for months. I knew it was coming, and I wasn't just prepared to survive it, I was prepared to win. That phone call. It set in motion a chain of events that would expose every lie, every betrayal, and every dirty secret my family had buried for decades. What they did to me was cruel. What I'm about to do to them, that's called justice. By the time this story is over, you'll see how a woman who lost everything in one night took back not just her career, but her power, her dignity, and her family's entire legacy. And she did it so brilliantly that they never saw it coming until it was too late. Tomorrow morning wasn't going to be fun. It was going to be legendary. My name is Melissa James. I'm 37 years old, and until tonight, I was the chief financial officer of James & Compton, the manufacturing company my grandfather built from nothing 50 years ago. For the past 12 years, I've been the one actually running this company, balancing the books, managing operations, negotiating contracts, keeping us profitable through recessions and supply chain disasters, while everyone else took the credit. But tonight at our family's Thanksgiving dinner, I'm about to learn that 12 years of loyalty means absolutely nothing when you're not the favorite child. The dining room of my parents' estate looks like something out of a magazine. All crystal chandeliers, polished mahogany, and china so expensive you're afraid to breathe near it. The long table is set with our grandmother's best silver, the kind that gets polished twice a year whether it needs it or not. Candles flicker in their holders, casting warm light across the faces of my family. It should feel cozy, traditional, safe. Instead, the air feels heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm when you know something's coming but you can't quite see it yet. I sit across from my younger sister Clara, watching her pick at her sweet potatoes with that satisfied little smile she gets when she knows something you don't. Clara is 32, beautiful in that effortless way that's always come naturally to her with our mother's blonde hair and delicate features. She's wearing a cream silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments, and her engagement ring catches the candlelight every time she moves her hand. She's always been the golden child, the one our parents show off at charity galas, the one whose college graduation photos still sit in silver frames on every surface of this house, while mine are tucked away in some drawer upstairs. I've made my peace with that over the years, or at least I thought I had. Our parents sit at opposite ends of the table like a king and queen holding court. My father, Robert James, 63 years old and still handsome in that distinguished silver fox way, carves the turkey with practiced precision. My mother, Patricia, sits straight-backed in her chair, her pearl necklace perfectly positioned, her expression carefully neutral. But I've noticed something tonight that makes my stomach tight with unease, the way they keep glancing at each other. Little looks that pass between them like secret messages. The way my mother's hand trembles slightly when she reaches for her wine glass. The way my father clears his throat twice, but doesn't say whatever he's thinking. Something is coming. I can feel it the way you feel a train approaching before you see it. "Melissa, darling, you've barely touched your food," my mother says, her voice carrying that tone of gentle criticism she's perfected over decades. "Is something wrong with the turkey? I had chef use that recipe you liked last year." "It's perfect, Mom," I say, forcing a smile. "I'm just not very hungry tonight." That's a lie. I'm starving. but my throat feels too tight to swallow and I can't shake the feeling that I need to stay alert, stay present, pay attention to what's happening around me. Clara sets down her fork with a delicate clink against her plate. She reaches for her champagne glass. When did someone pour champagne and stands up slowly, gracefully, like she's practiced this moment in front of a mirror? She taps a knife against the crystal, and the clear, sharp sound cuts through the low conversation around the table. "Everyone," she says, her voice bright and confident, "I have an announcement to make." The table falls silent. My Uncle Frank stops mid-chew. My Aunt Margaret sets down her wine glass. Even the staff standing discreetly by the kitchen door seem to freeze in place. Clara's smile grows wider, and in that moment I see something in her eyes that I've never noticed before, not just triumph, but cruelty. The kind of satisfaction that comes not just from winning, but from watching someone else lose. "Mom and Dad have made a decision about the future of James and Coming," she says, her eyes sweeping the table but very carefully not landing on me. "After careful consideration and months of discussion, they've decided that the company needs bold new leadership to take us into the next era. And they've chosen me." She pauses for effect, letting that sink in. "As of next Monday, I'll be the new CEO of James & Co." The silence that follows is absolute. Someone's fork clatters against a plate. I hear my aunt gasp softly. But I don't move. I don't react. Because somewhere deep in my gut, underneath the shock and the hurt and the rage that's starting to build like a fire catching kindling, I'm not actually surprised. Some part of me has always known it would come to this. But Clara isn't finished. She turns to face me directly now, and her smile becomes something sharper, something that cuts. "And Melissa," she says, her voice dropping into a tone of false sympathy that makes my skin crawl. "I know this might be difficult to hear, but the company really does need fresh leadership, new vision, someone who isn't so stuck in the old ways of doing things." She tilts her head, and the candlelight makes her look almost angelic. "You've done wonderful work as CFO, really you have, but your position will be terminated effective tomorrow morning. I'll have HR prepare your severance package. It's very generous, I made sure of that." The table erupts. My uncle is sputtering something about company protocol. My aunt is whispering urgently to my mother. But I hear it all from very far away, like I'm underwater and they're all on the surface, their voices distorted and strange. Everyone is looking at me now, waiting for the explosion. Waiting for me to cry or scream or throw something. Clara is still standing there with that triumphant smile, probably expecting me to beg to plead, to ask our parents how they could do this to me. But I don't do any of those things. Instead, I very carefully set down my fork. I dab the corners of my mouth with my napkin, the linen one with our family initials embroidered in the corner. I fold it neatly and place it beside my plate. Then I look directly at Clara and I smile. It's not a big smile, not dramatic or threatening, just a small, quiet curve of my lips that doesn't reach my eyes. "Congratulations, Clara," I say softly. My voice doesn't shake. "I hope you'll be very happy in your new position." I push back my chair slowly, deliberately, and stand. I can feel everyone's eyes on me, feel the confusion radiating off my family like heat. This isn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to fall apart. That was the plan. That's what they wanted. I walk to where my mother sits frozen with her wine glass halfway to her lips, and I kiss her cheek. "Thank you for dinner, Mom. It was lovely." Then I walk out of that dining room with my head high and my back straight, and I don't look back even once. I hear Clara say something behind me, probably something cutting and clever, but I don't register the words. I'm already too far away, already moving toward what comes next. I collect my coat from the front closet, ignoring the concerned hovering of Jenkins, our family's longtime butler, who's known me since I was 7 years old, and can probably read the storm brewing in my silence. I walk out the front door into the cold November night, my heels clicking on the stone steps, my breath making clouds in the freezing air. My car is waiting in the circular driveway, and I slide into the driver's seat, close the door, and finally let myself exhale. My hands are shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system. But underneath the shock and the hurt, I feel something else rising. Something cold and clear and absolutely certain. I pull out my phone and scroll through my contacts until I find the number I need. The number I've kept saved for 2 years, ever since he left the company under mysterious circumstances that Clara never wanted to talk about. I hit call. It rings twice before he answers. Melissa. Ethan Cole's voice is surprised cautious. It's been a while. They just fired me, I say without preamble. At Thanksgiving dinner, Clara announced she's the new CEO and I'm out effective tomorrow. There's a long pause. Then Ethan's voice changes, becomes sharper, more focused. So it's happening. Just like we thought it would. Just like we thought it would, I confirm. Are you ready? He asks. I look back at the house where my family is probably still sitting around that table, probably celebrating Clara's victory, probably thinking this is over and they've won. I've been ready for months, I say quietly. Let's begin. I end the call and sit in my car for one more moment, watching the warm light spilling from the windows of my childhood home. Then I start the engine, and I drive away from everything I used to be. So, they think I didn't see this coming. They have no idea what's coming for them. I'm 20 minutes down the highway, headlights cutting through the darkness when my phone rings. The screen illuminates the interior of my car with cold blue light, unknown number. My first instinct is to ignore it. I'm not in the mood for robocalls or wrong numbers, not tonight. But something makes me answer anyway, some intuition I can't quite explain. Melissa James. I say, my voice still steadier than I feel. Melissa, don't react. Don't fight back tomorrow. The voice is male familiar in a way that makes my heart skip a beat. They're setting you up for something bigger than termination. I nearly swerve into the next lane. Ethan Cole. I haven't heard his voice in 2 years, not since he left the company under what everyone politely called mutual agreement. But what I knew was Clara maneuvering him out because he asked too many questions about budgets that didn't add up. He was our senior strategic advisor, the person my grandfather trusted most outside of family, and one of the few people in that company who treated me like I had a brain instead of just a famous last name. He was also, once upon a time, something more than a colleague. But that's a complication I can't afford to think about right now. How did you get this number? I ask, though it's not really what I want to know. What I want to know is how he knew about tonight. How he knew I'd need this call exactly when I needed it. I've been monitoring the company from a distance, he says, and there's an urgency in his voice that makes my hands tighten on the steering wheel. Melissa, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Over the past 6 months, someone has been creating fraudulent accounting records in the company's system, fake transactions, forged signatures, suspicious fund transfers to shell companies that don't actually exist. My stomach drops. What are you talking about? Every single one of those transactions is documented under your credentials, he says. Your digital signature, your approval codes, your employee ID. Whoever did this has been very, very careful to make it look like you've been embezzling from James & Company for months. I pull off at the next exit, my hands shaking so badly I can barely control the car. I park in the empty lot of a closed gas station, my headlights illuminating a broken payphone and scattered trash. That's insane. I would never— I know that, Ethan interrupts. But the evidence looks real, Melissa. Frighteningly real. We're talking about transactions ranging from $50,000 to $500,000, all moving through accounts that trace back to an offshore entity. And the timing is perfect. They all occurred during periods when you had full access to company financial systems. I feel like I'm going to be sick. But I didn't do any of this. I've never even seen these transactions. I believe you, he says, and something in his voice that absolute certainty is the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. But here's what you need to understand. If you fight the termination tomorrow, if you make any noise at all about unfair dismissal or wrongful termination, They're going to immediately accuse you of fraud and embezzlement. They'll say you're trying to destroy evidence that you're lashing out because you got caught. The trap is already set, Melissa. They're just waiting for you to walk into it. I close my eyes, trying to process this. How sophisticated are we talking? Very, Ethan says grimly. Your digital signatures appear on documents you've never seen, approved on dates when you were actually on business trips to Denver and Austin. I checked your travel records. There are email trails that look completely authentic, messages allegedly from you authorizing these transfers. Someone has gone to enormous trouble to make this look real. My mind is racing now, moving through possibilities and probabilities the way it does when I'm analyzing a complex financial problem. The dates when I was traveling, someone would have had to use my credentials while I was physically out of the office. That means it's someone internal, someone with high-level access. Exactly, Ethan says. And that's why I've been gathering evidence for the past 2 years. When Clara forced me out, I knew something was wrong. The numbers weren't adding up even then, but I couldn't prove anything. So I've been watching from the outside, collecting data, following digital trails, and what I've found goes way beyond simple embezzlement. What do you mean? My voice sounds hollow even to my own ears. I can't explain everything over the phone, he says. But Melissa, this isn't just about you and Clara fighting over a CEO position. This is bigger. There are people involved who have been planning this for a long time, and your termination is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. I sit in the silence of my car, watching moths circle in my headlights, and I feel something shift inside me. The shock is fading now, replaced by something colder and sharper. Clarity. What do you suggest I do? I ask. Let them think they've buried you, Ethan says, and I can hear the strategic mind that made him such a valuable advisor clicking into place. Sign whatever termination papers they put in front of you. Don't fight, don't protest, act defeated. That's when people get careless, when they think they've won. They'll start making mistakes, and that's when we move. I say quietly. There's a pause on the other end of the line. I'm offering to help you, Melissa. I have evidence. I have contacts. I have resources they don't know about. But I need you to trust me. Trust. That's a complicated word when it comes to Ethan Cole. We have history, the kind that ended with hurt feelings, and words we didn't mean, and a proposal I turned down because I was too loyal to a family that apparently never deserved that loyalty. Seeing him again, working with him, trusting him with something this important that's going to dredge up emotions, I've spent 2 years trying to bury. But right now, sitting in this parking lot with my entire world crumbling around me, I don't have the luxury of protecting my heart. Send me what you have, I say. Everything. I want to see these documents. I'm sending them now, Ethan says. Check your personal email, not your company account. And Melissa, I'm sorry about all of this, about what they're doing to you. But we're going to fix this. I promise you that. The call ends, and I sit in the darkness listening to my phone buzz with incoming emails. I open my personal account with shaking hands, and there they are, dozens of files, each one more damning than the last. Transaction records with my name, approval forms with my signature, email chains I never wrote. And at the top of one document dated 3 days ago, a fund transfer for $275,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands, authorized by Melissa James, Chief Financial Officer. I stare at my own forged signature until the letters blur together, and I finally understand exactly how much trouble I'm in. I don't go home that night. Instead, I check into a hotel 20 miles outside the city, somewhere anonymous where nobody knows my name or my face. I spread the documents across the desk in my room like a detective organizing evidence at a crime scene, and I spend the next 8 hours doing what I do best, analyzing numbers, looking for patterns, searching for the truth buried in the lies. The forgeries are extraordinary. Whoever created these documents understood not just accounting, but how I think, how I work, how I structure my approvals. There are 47 separate transactions spread across the past 12 months, ranging from $50,000 on the low end to $500,000 on the high end. Each one is funneled through shell companies, with names designed to sound legitimate but vague enough to avoid scrutiny. Consulting Services, LLC, Advisory Group International Strategic Solutions, Partners Global Business Initiatives. The kind of vendors that could theoretically exist in any large company's ecosystem without raising immediate red flags. My signature appears on every single approval form, and it's not just a sloppy forgery. Whoever did this studied my handwriting, the specific way I loop my capital M, the slight backward slant of my S, even the small flourish I add to the tail of my final letter. It's so accurate that if I didn't know with absolute certainty that I never signed these documents, I might doubt myself. What makes it even more convincing is the timing. Every transaction correlates with legitimate company activities during periods when I genuinely had full access to all financial systems. There's a $200,000 payment to Strategic Solutions Partners, dated the same week we closed the Henderson manufacturing deal. There's a $350,000 transfer to Advisory Group International that coincides with our annual compliance audit. Someone planned this, carefully embedding the fraudulent transactions alongside real business operations so they'd blend in, so they'd look like just another line item in a company that processes millions of dollars in transactions every quarter. The most damaging detail is that all of this happened during the past year, the period when I had the most authority, the most trust, the most access. If this goes public, even people who know me, even people who've worked with me for years, will have that tiny seed of doubt. Could she have done it? Did the pressure get to her? Was there something going on in her personal life that made her desperate? Once that doubt exists, once people start questioning, the truth becomes almost irrelevant. Perception becomes reality. I sit back in my chair as dawn light starts creeping through the hotel curtains, and I feel the full weight of how trapped I am. If I walk into the office this morning and fight my termination, if I demand explanations or threaten legal action, they'll drop this bomb immediately. They'll call the authorities, leak the documents to the press, destroy my reputation so completely that nothing I say afterward will matter. I'll be the disgraced executive who got caught stealing and tried to cover it up by claiming conspiracy. Every news outlet will run with that story because it's compelling, it's dramatic, and it confirms what people already want to believe about wealthy families and corporate corruption. But if I don't fight, if I simply accept defeat and walk away quietly, I buy myself something invaluable: time. Time to investigate, time to gather real evidence, time to understand who's really behind this and why. Fighting on their terms, on their timeline, means I've already lost. I need to change the game entirely. And that means making them think the game is over. The decision crystallizes in my mind with absolute clarity. I will sign whatever termination papers they put in front of me. I will act defeated, maybe even relieved to be done with it all. I will make them believe they've won so completely that they stop being careful. Because overconfidence is where people make mistakes, where they get sloppy, where they reveal things they meant to keep hidden. Before I do anything else, though, I need to protect what I still have. I pull out my phone and start photographing key pages from my actual work records, the legitimate approvals I did, sign the real vendor contracts, the authentic email chains that prove what my normal business patterns looked like. I download encrypted backups of my calendar, my expense reports, my travel documentation. Everything that proves where I really was and what I was really doing during those times when my forged signature was supposedly authorizing fraudulent transactions. I create a secure folder and send everything to Ethan through an encrypted channel he set up years ago, back when we worked together and occasionally dealt with sensitive competitive intelligence. The technology feels almost paranoid, but right now paranoia seems entirely justified. As I'm organizing the files, something catches my attention. I spread out the fraudulent transaction records again and trace the money flow with my finger. Every single shell company, all 47 transactions, ultimately routes through the same offshore account. The account number is partially redacted in most documents, but there's enough visible information that I can see the pattern. It's registered in the Cayman Islands under a trust structure that's clearly designed to obscure the real ownership. but the routing codes are consistent across every transaction. This is the thread. This is the weakness in their plan. Shell companies are easy to create and hard to trace, but money always leaves a trail if you know how to follow it. Whoever set this up was meticulous about forging my signature and timing the transactions perfectly, but they made one critical mistake. They consolidated everything through a single destination. That means there's one point of vulnerability, one place where all the lies converge into a truth that can be proven. I pick up my phone and call Ethan. He answers on the first ring, and I can hear the exhaustion in his voice that matches my own. "Did you find something?" he asks. "The offshore account," I say. "Every fraudulent transaction flows through it. If we can trace the real ownership, we can prove who's actually behind this." "That's going to take time," Ethan warns. "Those structures are designed specifically to prevent tracing." "Then we'd better start now," I say. "Because I'm going into that office this morning and I'm signing whatever they want me to sign." There's a pause. "Are you sure about that?" I look at the documents scattered across my hotel desk at my forged signature staring back at me from dozens of pages at the trap that's been so carefully constructed around me. And I feel something cold and determined settle into my chest, something that has nothing to do with anger and everything to do with strategy. "Let them think they've buried me," I say quietly. I arrive at the office at 6:30 in the morning, 90 minutes before anyone else typically shows up. The building is quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of the cleaning crew finishing their overnight shift. I use my keycard to access the executive floor, wondering absently how long it will be before they deactivate it. Probably by noon today, once the paperwork is processed, and I'm officially erased from the company systems like I never existed at all. My office looks exactly the way I left it yesterday morning, back when I still believed I had a future here. The awards lining the shelves. CFO of the Year from the Business Association, Excellence in Financial Leadership. The crystal plaque commemorating our record-breaking quarter last spring. Framed photos of company milestones I helped achieve. The leather-bound notebook my grandfather gave me when I first joined the company, his shaky handwriting on the inside cover. "Never forget why we do this work for the people who depend on us." I run my fingers over those words and feel a sharp pain in my chest that has nothing to do with my termination and everything to do with what he would think if he could see what his company has become. I pull a cardboard box from the supply closet and begin packing methodically. Each item I remove from the shelf feels like stripping away a piece of my identity, but I force myself to move with calm precision. I'm aware that once other employees arrive, I'll have an audience, and I need to project exactly the right image: dignified, composed, quietly defeated. No anger, no dramatics, nothing that will make them suspicious about what I'm actually planning. The elevator dings at 7:15 and I hear voices in the hallway. Within minutes, people start appearing in my doorway. Jennifer from accounting stands there with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Marcus from operations looks furious, his jaw clenched so tight I can see the muscle jumping. Nobody says much at first. They just watch me pack their presence, a silent testimony to what everyone in this building knows. But nobody says out loud, "I'm the one who kept this place running while Clara collected credit and my parents collected dividends." I'm placing my framed MBA diploma in the box when I remember the ring. I pull it from my pocket, feeling the weight of it in my palm. It's my grandfather's silver ring, the one he wore every day for 50 years, engraved with the company's founding date and his initials. When he died, he left it specifically to me with a note that said I'd earned the right to carry his legacy forward. I've kept it in my desk drawer for years, too precious to risk losing, taking it out sometimes when I needed to remember why I fought so hard for this place. Now, I set it carefully on the desk, positioning it near the edge where it catches the morning light streaming through the window. To anyone watching, it looks like a sentimental gesture, like I'm leaving behind a piece of my heart, because it hurts too much to take it with me. What they don't know is that Ethan had it modified 3 days ago after I told him I suspected something was coming. The band now contains a miniature camera and audio recorder technology so advanced and so small that it's completely invisible to the naked eye. The battery will last for weeks, and it's already synced to my secure cloud server. Everything that happens in this office from this moment forward will be recorded and backed up where no one can erase it. I close the last box and take one final look around the space that's been mine for over a decade. Then I pick up my boxes and walk toward the elevator. The hallway has filled with people, now employees emerging from their cubicles and offices to watch me leave. The silence is profound and somehow louder than if they were all talking at once. I see Sarah from HR crying quietly into a tissue. I see Tom from the warehouse standing with his arms crossed, shaking his head in disgust. I see Marcus step forward and reach for one of my boxes. "Let me help you with those," he says, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, Marcus," I say quietly, and I let him take the heavier box. As we walk to the elevator, people approach me one by one. Jennifer slips a piece of paper into my hand with her personal phone number scrawled on it. David from legal whispers, "Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything." Michael Chen, our senior accountant, who's been with the company almost as long as I have, steps directly into my path and looks me in the eyes. "We all know who really built this company," he says loud enough that everyone nearby can hear. "Whatever happens next, you need to know that." I feel my throat tighten with genuine emotion, but I manage to nod and squeeze his shoulder as I pass. These people, these colleagues who've worked beside me through late nights and crisis situations, and impossible deadlines, they're the real heart of James & Combe. Clara has the title now, and my parents have the ownership stake, but loyalty can't be transferred with a signature. Trust can't be commanded from a corner office. Respect has to be earned over years of showing up and doing the work and treating people like they matter. Clara has none of those things. She has power without foundation authority, without credibility. And that difference, that fundamental hollowness at the core of her victory, is going to matter more than she realizes. The elevator doors close, and Marcus and I ride down in silence. He helps me load the boxes into my car, and then he stands there in the parking garage looking at me with an expression I can't quite read. "This isn't right," he finally says. "What they did to you. It's not right, and everybody knows it." "Sometimes things that aren't right still happen," I say carefully. "But I appreciate you saying it." I get into my car and start the engine. As I'm pulling out of my parking space, the one with my name on it that will probably have Clara's name painted over it by next week. My phone buzzes in the cup holder. I glance down at the screen and see a notification from my cloud storage app. The surveillance system is active. The ring is already transmitting, and the first file has been automatically saved and encrypted with a timestamp of 8:37 a.m. I tap the notification and pull up the live feed. The camera angle shows my former desk from slightly above, capturing most of the office. As I watch, Clara enters the frame. She's wearing a navy suit that I recognize as new, probably bought specifically for her first day as CEO. She sits down in my chair, swiveling slightly to test how it feels, and then she pulls out her phone. Even without sound, I can read her body language. She's calling someone. Her posture is relaxed, triumphant. She's smiling that same cold smile she wore at dinner last night. I turn up the volume on my phone and hear her voice come through clearly, the audio quality surprisingly good, despite the ring's tiny microphone. "It's done," Clara says into her phone, her tone bright with satisfaction. "She's gone." I sit in my car in the parking garage, watching my sister celebrate my destruction in the office that used to be mine, and I allow myself the smallest smile. Recording saved. Device active. Let the real game begin. I'm sitting in my apartment that evening, still wearing the clothes I wore to pack up my office, when my laptop chimes with an incoming encrypted message from Ethan. The subject line reads simply, "You need to see this immediately." My hand trembles slightly as I click to download the attached files, entering the complex password he provided in a separate text message. The files are large, taking almost a minute to decrypt and open, And when they finally appear on my screen, I have to read the first page 3 times before my brain can process what I'm seeing. The James Family Trust. Established April 12, 2003, by Arthur James, my grandfather, 20 years before his death. I've never heard of this entity. Not once in all my years working at the company, not in any board meeting or shareholder report or family discussion, has anyone ever mentioned that this trust exists. According to the documents, the trust holds 40% of James & Company's total shares. 40%. I sit back in my chair feeling dizzy as I mentally calculate what that means. My father holds 25% through his personal ownership. My mother holds 15%. Various small investors and board members hold the remaining 20% in scattered pieces. But this trust, this ghost entity that nobody talks about, controls more of the company than any single person or group. Whoever controls this trust effectively controls the company's future. The trust document is dense with legal language, the kind of carefully constructed framework that only expensive attorneys can create. I read through pages of definitions and provisions and contingencies, my CFO brain automatically parsing the complex structures. The trust is managed by an independent law firm called Barrett & Associates, a name I recognize as one of the oldest and most prestigious corporate law practices in the state. The trust operates as its own legal entity, completely separate from any individual family member with voting rights that can be exercised by whoever holds the position of designated beneficiary. And the conditions for transferring control to a beneficiary are extraordinarily specific. I find them buried on page 17, highlighted now by Ethan in bright yellow. Control of trust voting rights shall transfer to that grandchild of Arthur James, who demonstrates both fiduciary responsibility in service to the company and who is unjustly removed from company leadership due to family political considerations, rather than performance-based criteria. I read that sentence 5 times, my heart pounding harder with each repetition. My grandfather wrote this provision with surgical precision. He didn't just create a trust to hold shares. He created a trap for exactly the kind of betrayal that just happened to me. He anticipated 2 decades ago that family politics might override merit, that someone competent might be pushed out to make room for someone connected, and he built a legal mechanism to correct that injustice automatically. There's another document attached, this one a scanned image of a handwritten letter on my grandfather's personal stationery. The date at the top reads July 1998, which means I was 15 years old. I can barely breathe as I start reading his familiar handwriting, the same script I remember from birthday cards and notes of encouragement throughout my childhood. Melissa. The letter begins. If you're reading this, then I was right to worry. I've watched you grow into a young woman of exceptional intelligence and integrity. You have your grandmother's gift for numbers and my stubborn insistence on doing things the right way, even when it's hard. These qualities will make you an excellent steward of our family's legacy, but they will also make you a target. My vision blurs with tears, but I force myself to keep reading. I've seen too many family businesses destroyed by favoritism and power struggles. I've watched capable people pushed aside to make room for charming incompetence. I've seen parents choose the child who flatters them over the child who actually does the work. I will not let that happen to you or to the company I built. This trust is my way of ensuring that merit, not manipulation, determines who leads our legacy. The company belongs to those who earn it through service and sacrifice, not those who inherit it through birth order and politics. The letter continues for another page, laying out his philosophy about leadership and responsibility, about the difference between authority and power, about why he trusted me specifically with this safeguard, even though I was barely a teenager when he wrote it. He ends with words that feel like they're reaching across time to speak directly to this moment. If you're reading this, someone has betrayed you. Someone has tried to take what you earned. Don't let them. Fight back. You have the tools now. Use them. My hands are shaking as I pick up my phone and dial the number listed on the trust documents for Barrett & Associates. It's after business hours, but the document includes an emergency contact line. A woman answers on the 3rd ring. Barrett & Associates, this is Catherine Morrison speaking. My name is Melissa James. I say, my voice steadier than I expect. I need to verify my status as beneficiary of the James Family Trust. There's a pause, the sound of typing. Ms. James. Yes, I've been expecting your call. Mr. Barrett asked me to wait by the phone this evening. Can you please verify your identity by providing your mother's maiden name and the year your grandfather founded the company? I answer both questions correctly. More typing. Then, Catherine's voice returns warmer now. Thank you, Ms. James. I'm looking at your file now. Based on the termination letter you signed this morning, which was filed with our office at 11:43 a.m., the Trust's activation clause has been triggered. As of 48 hours from that filing time, you will have full voting control over the Trust's 40% shareholding in James & Co. Mr. Barrett would like to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow morning to discuss the specifics and answer any questions you might have. I close my eyes, feeling something shift fundamentally in my understanding of where I stand. 24 hours ago, I thought I was being pushed out of my family's company with nothing but a severance package and a destroyed reputation. Now I'm learning that my grandfather gave me the keys to the kingdom 2 decades ago, just waiting for the right circumstances to activate them. Tell Mr. Barrett I'll be there at 9 a.m., I say. After I hang up, I sit in the growing darkness of my apartment, my laptop screen the only source of light. I pull up the Trust's balance sheet one more time and stare at the number 40% ownership. Enough to block any major decision. Enough to force votes. Enough to remove a CEO if necessary. Clara thinks she's won. My parents think they've successfully maneuvered me out. They have no idea what's coming. I look at my grandfather's letter one more time at his handwriting that seems so alive despite being written when I was just learning algebra, and I whisper into the empty room. Let's begin. The meeting with Mr. Barrett the next morning confirms everything Ethan sent me, and by noon, I have full legal documentation proving my control over the trust. But documentation isn't action, and I don't have time to waste. Within hours of leaving Barrett's office, I'm already making calls, already setting pieces in motion that Clara won't see coming until it's far too late. My first target is Hartwell Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing competitor that James & Company almost acquired 3 years ago. I remember the due diligence report I prepared back then, recommending the acquisition as strategically sound. My father dismissed it in a board meeting, saying Hartwell was too small to matter, not worth the headache of integration. What he meant was that buying Hartwell would require actual work, actual change, actual engagement with operations. Much easier to just coast on our existing market position and let someone else worry about growth. But I remember something else about Hartwell. Their owner, Thomas Hartwell, is 68 years old and has been trying to retire for years. He can't find a buyer willing to preserve his company culture and protect his employees' jobs. Most potential acquirers just want to strip the assets and eliminate the workforce. I also know, because I make it my business to know these things, that Hartwell is currently struggling with a cash flow crisis that could force bankruptcy within 6 months. I call Thomas directly, not through intermediaries or lawyers, and I make him an offer over lunch at a quiet restaurant downtown. $8 million to restructure Hartwell into a new entity, with him staying on as senior advisor for 2 years to ensure continuity. The company will be renamed Clarity Industries, and while I don't explain the bitter irony of that name, I see Ethan's smirk when I tell him about it later. Thomas will retain a small equity stake. His employees will keep their jobs with better benefits, and the company will have the capital to not just survive but expand. The catch I explained to Thomas is that the public-facing CEO will be Ethan Cole, while I remain the anonymous majority owner operating through a holding company structure. Thomas, who's known me professionally for years and respects my work, even if we were technically competitors, doesn't ask many questions about why I want anonymity. He's smart enough to read between the lines, smart enough to understand that something complicated is happening with my family's company. He just nods slowly and says, "When can we start the paperwork?" 2 weeks later, Clarity Industries officially exists, and I own something that gives me leverage my family doesn't even know about yet. But ownership isn't enough. I need to make clarity matter, and the fastest way to do that is to attack James & Co. Where it's most vulnerable, the supply chain I built myself over 12 years of careful relationship management. I know every vendor, every contract term, every negotiation pain point. I know which suppliers are unhappy with late payments, which ones want longer-term commitments, which ones have been quietly shopping for better partners. I start with Robertson Materials, our primary raw materials supplier. They've been frustrated with James & Company for months because Clara, in one of her early cost-cutting initiatives, extended payment terms from 30 days to 60 days without negotiating it properly. I call Robertson's VP of Sales and offer him something simple: 45-day terms, a 3-year contract instead of annual renewals, and guaranteed minimum order volumes that give him revenue predictability. He signs with clarity within a week. Next is Landmark Logistics, who handles our distribution and warehousing. They've been wanting to upgrade their fleet but can't get James & Company to commit to the volume necessary to justify the investment. I offer them a 5-year contract with graduated volume increases and agree to cover 20% of their fleet upgrade costs in exchange for priority service. They accept immediately. The third supplier, Precision Components, won't switch entirely, but they agree to reduce James & Company's capacity allocation by 40%, shifting that capacity to Clarity instead. They're careful not to breach their existing contracts, but they're equally careful to make sure I know they're positioning for a future where Clarity is their primary customer. Clara won't notice any of this immediately. The contracts don't expire for 60 to 90 days, and even then the impact will be gradual. But 3 months from now, James & Company will suddenly find itself unable to fulfill orders on time, unable to access the materials and logistics capacity it needs, unable to serve clients who've counted on us for years. And Clara will have no idea why it's happening or how to fix it because she never bothered to learn how the actual business operates. I'm working late in my apartment reviewing supplier contracts on my laptop when Ethan arrives with coffee and takeout food. We've fallen into this routine over the past 2 weeks, working together the way we used to years ago, when we were both young and ambitious and believed we could fix anything if we just worked hard enough. But there's a tension now that wasn't there before. Or maybe it was always there, and we're just finally acknowledging it. He sets the coffee beside my laptop and sits down across from me, and for a long moment, neither of us says anything. Then he speaks, his voice quiet, but carrying an edge I haven't heard before. "I waited 2 years for you to call," he says, not looking at me. "After I left the company, after everything that happened between us. I waited because I thought eventually you'd realize that you couldn't fix your family, that you couldn't save people who didn't want to be saved." I feel something twist in my chest, old pain mixing with new regret. 5 years ago, Ethan proposed to me. We were in love, or at least I thought we were, and he wanted me to leave James & Company to start fresh somewhere else, to build a life that wasn't defined by my family's expectations and my grandfather's legacy. I said no. I told him I couldn't abandon the company when it needed me, when I was the only person holding things together. He accepted a job with a consulting firm in Boston, and we stopped talking entirely. Clean break, no messy goodbyes, just silence where there used to be something real. "I never stopped protecting you," he continues, finally meeting my eyes. "Even when you chose them over us. Even when you made it clear that the company mattered more than I did. I kept watching, kept monitoring, kept gathering information because I knew someday they'd do exactly what they just did. And I wanted to be ready to help you when it happened." I don't know what to say to that. Part of me wants to defend my choice, to explain that it wasn't about him mattering less, it was about responsibility and duty and promises made to a dying grandfather. But another part of me knows he's right. I did choose the company over him. I chose the family that just betrayed me over the man who actually loved me. And now here we are working together again, and I don't know if we're partners or if we're just two people using each other to achieve the same goal. "I'm sorry," I finally say, and I mean it. "You deserved better than what I gave you." He nods slowly, but doesn't say anything else. Some wounds don't heal just because you acknowledge them. Some damage can't be undone just because you're on the same side again. My phone buzzes with a news alert breaking the heavy silence. I glance at the screen and see the headline that makes my jaw clench. Clara James promises bold new era for family company. I click the article and read Clara's quotes about innovation and fresh perspectives and leading James & Company into the future. Not a single mention of the 12 years of work that built the foundation she's now standing on. Not a word about the people who actually made the company successful. I set down my phone and look at Ethan. Let's make sure her bold new era is very short, I say. While Clara makes promises to the press about her bold new era, I'm making quiet moves she'll never see in time. But I don't have to wait long to see the first cracks appear in her carefully constructed facade. Ethan has maintained contact with several people still inside James & Co., and 2 weeks after my departure, he forwards me notes from the first board meeting under Clara's leadership. Reading them feels like watching a slow-motion car crash. The CFO's report prepared by my former deputy, who now reports directly to Clara, shows trends that would alarm anyone who actually understands what they're looking at. 3 major clients have postponed significant orders, and when pressed for reasons, they all cited some version of uncertainty about company direction. That's corporate speak for, we don't trust the new leadership. Operating margins have dropped 3% in just 2 weeks, a decline that would normally trigger immediate investigation and corrective action. But according to Ethan's source, Clara dismissed it as seasonal fluctuation, a term that might sound plausible to people who don't work in manufacturing, but is essentially meaningless to anyone who does. What catches my attention most is Raymond Cole's questioning. Raymond has been on our board for 23 years, longer than anyone except my parents. He was my grandfather's closest friend and advisor, the person Grandpa trusted most outside of family. According to the notes Raymond asked, pointed specific questions about vendor relationships and supply chain status. Clara answered confidently, but Raymond apparently noticed something I would have noticed too if I'd been there. She was reading from prepared notes, speaking in generalities, unable to provide actual details when pressed. She doesn't know the business. She knows talking points. The meeting adjourned with what the notes describe as visible tension and concerned expressions among board members. That's exactly what I hoped would happen, though. Honestly, I expected it to take longer. Clara is self-destructing faster than even I anticipated. 3 days after that board meeting, Ethan gets another message from his inside source. Raymond approached 2 other board members privately after everyone else had left, initiating a conversation in the parking garage where they thought no one would overhear. But Clara's executive assistant, a young woman named Sophie, who's apparently very loyal to her new boss, was retrieving something from her car and heard part of the exchange. Raymond's words, according to Sophie's report to Clara, were carefully chosen but unmistakably critical. Melissa built the operational foundation of this company, Raymond said. Clara has ambition, certainly, but does she have substance? Does she understand what actually makes this business run? The other board members admitted they'd been having similar concerns. One of them mentioned that several department heads had been asking questions about my departure, phrasing them in ways that suggested they expected it to be temporary, as if I might be on some kind of sabbatical rather than permanently terminated. The conversation apparently ended when they noticed Sophie nearby and everyone scattered quickly, but the damage was done. Clara now knows that at least 3 board members are questioning her competence just 2 weeks into her tenure. When Ethan tells me about this, I feel a grim satisfaction. I'm not the only one who sees through her. The people who actually understand how businesses operate are already recognizing what I've known for years. Clara is all polish and no foundation. Then my phone rings with a number I don't immediately recognize. When I answer, I hear Raymond Cole's distinctive gravelly voice, warm but serious. Melissa, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I was wondering if you might be free for lunch tomorrow. There are some things we should discuss privately. We meet at a small Italian restaurant in the financial district, the kind of place where business people go for discreet conversations. Raymond is already seated when I arrive, looking distinguished in a gray suit, his silver hair perfectly combed. He stands to greet me, and I see something in his eyes that looks like approval mixed with concern. "Thank you for coming," he says as we sit down. "I imagine these past few weeks have been difficult." "That's one word for it," I say carefully, unsure how much Raymond knows or what he wants from this meeting. He doesn't waste time with small talk. Once the waiter takes our orders and leaves, Raymond leans forward and speaks in a low voice that won't carry to neighboring tables. "Your grandfather confided in me about the family trust," he says, and my heart nearly stops. "He made me a backup trustee years ago, though I've never needed to exercise any authority. He told me he was creating a safeguard, something to protect the company if family politics ever overrode good judgment. He was very specific about the conditions that would activate your control." Raymond pauses, studying my face. "I'm assuming you've already discovered all of this." I nod slowly. "Mr. Barrett explained everything last week." "Good," Raymond says. "Then you know you have options, but I'm here to tell you about another option, one your grandfather built into the company bylaws themselves." He reaches into his briefcase and pulls out a manila folder, sliding it across the table to me. "Section 47, subsection C. Your grandfather drafted it himself and convinced the board to adopt it as part of our governance structure. Most people have forgotten it exists because it's never been invoked." I open the folder and start reading. The language is dense, but the meaning becomes clear quickly. Any shareholder holding 5% or more of company stock can call for an emergency vote of no confidence in the CEO if that CEO makes decisions affecting 100 or more employees without prior board approval. "Clara terminated 80 contractors last week," Raymond says quietly. "She signed the paperwork herself without consulting the board or even informing us until after it was done. She claimed it was a routine efficiency measure, but those contractors had been with us for years. Some of them were supporting entire families on those contracts." I look up from the document, my mind racing. 80 isn't 100. "No," Raymond agrees. "But I've heard through channels that she's planning to lay off at least 120 warehouse workers next month. She's already drafted the termination notices, apparently. She just hasn't pulled the trigger yet." He leans back in his chair. "If she makes one more mistake like that, you can remove her legally. You have the shareholding percentage through the trust. You have the bylaw provision. And after today's board meeting, I can tell you with certainty that you'd have the votes." Our food arrives, but I barely notice it. I'm calculating timelines, probabilities, strategic options. Clara is walking directly into a trap she doesn't even know exists. "Why are you telling me this?" I ask Raymond. "You could have stayed neutral, kept out of family politics." Raymond's expression becomes somber. "Your grandfather was my closest friend for 40 years. I watched him build this company from nothing, watched him pour his heart into creating something that would last beyond his lifetime. And I watched him die knowing that the wrong people might end up controlling it." He looks directly into my eyes. "I made him a promise before he passed. I promised I'd make sure his legacy went to the person who deserved it, not just the person who wanted it most. That person is you, Melissa. It always has been." I feel emotion tighten my throat, but I force it down. There will be time for feelings later. Right now, I need to think strategically. "How long do I have before she moves on the warehouse workers?" I ask. "Based on the timeline I've seen, probably 3 to 4 weeks, Raymond says. "She's waiting until after the quarterly numbers are finalized so she can present it as a response to declining performance." 3 to 4 weeks. Time enough to prepare to position all my pieces exactly where they need to be, to ensure that when Clara makes her fatal mistake, I'm ready to move decisively. Raymond picks up his water glass and looks at me with an expression I can't quite read. "If she makes one more mistake like that," he says quietly, "you can remove her legally." I spend the days after my lunch with Raymond planning my next moves, coordinating with Ethan, watching Clara through the surveillance feed from my grandfather's ring as she fumbles through meetings and makes promises she doesn't understand how to keep. But 3 weeks after my termination at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, My phone rings with a call that changes everything I thought I knew about my family. My mother's name appears on the screen. We haven't spoken since Thanksgiving, and for a moment I consider letting it go to voicemail. But something about the lateness of the hour makes me answer. "Melissa?" Her voice is shaking raw in a way I've never heard before. "You need to stop whatever you're planning. Please. You don't understand what you're risking." I sit up straighter on my couch, suddenly alert. "What are you talking about?" "I know you're planning something," she says, and I can hear her crying now, trying to muffle the sound. "I know you well enough to know you wouldn't just walk away. And I need you to stop. I need you to just take your severance and go far away from this company and this family and never look back." "Why would I do that?" I ask, keeping my voice neutral even though my heart is pounding. There's a long silence on the other end, broken only by her ragged breathing. Then she speaks again, and her words come out in a rush, like she's been holding them back for years and can no longer contain them. "Your grandfather didn't die of a heart attack." The room tilts slightly. I grip the phone harder. "What?" "The coroner ruled it natural causes." My mother continues, her voice breaking. "He was 73. He had a history of heart problems, and when he collapsed that night, everyone just accepted it. But I knew. God help me, I knew, and I said nothing." She's sobbing openly now. The symptoms those last 6 months before he died, the weakness, the confusion, the pain, the way his hands shook when he tried to write. It wasn't heart disease. It was something else. "Mom, what are you saying?" I feel like I'm underwater, her words reaching me distorted and strange. "Someone was poisoning him," she whispers. "Slowly, carefully, over months. And I think it was your father." I've always thought it was your father, but I couldn't prove it, and I was too afraid to try. Too afraid of what would happen if I accused him, and was wrong, too afraid of what would happen if I accused him and was right. I stand up without meaning to, pacing across my living room as my mind races. "That's insane. Why would Dad—" "Because your grandfather was going to change his will," my mother interrupts. "He told your father that he was disappointed in how the company was being run, that he was going to make changes to ensure it went to someone who actually understood the business. Your father knew that meant you, and he couldn't let that happen." I feel sick. "You've kept this to yourself for 15 years. "I didn't have proof," she says desperately. "Just suspicions. Just a feeling in my gut that something was terribly wrong. But I kept his prescription bottles. All of them from those last 6 months. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. I rented a storage unit, and I've kept them there all this time because something told me they mattered, that someday they might be important." She gives me the address of the storage unit and the key code, and I write them down with shaking hands. The next morning I drive to the facility on the edge of town, a grim concrete building with rows of identical orange doors. Inside Unit 247, among boxes of old clothes and forgotten furniture, I find a small cardboard box labeled only with a date the month my grandfather died. The prescription bottles inside are ordinary, the kind you'd find in any elderly person's medicine cabinet. Heart medication, blood pressure pills, vitamins. I handle them carefully, seal them in plastic bags the way I've seen done in crime shows, and take them to a private laboratory that Ethan recommends, one that specializes in forensic toxicology and doesn't ask unnecessary questions. The results take 4 days. When I return to collect them, the lab technician who hands me the report is a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. She looks at me with an expression that combines professional neutrality with something deeper. Something that might be sympathy or might be shared female understanding of terrible truths. "I have to tell you," she says quietly. "In 30 years of doing this work, I've seen a lot of cases. Accidental poisonings, industrial exposures, environmental contamination. But this," she taps the report, "this was deliberate. High levels of arsenic in all the medication bottles administered in doses small enough to avoid immediate suspicion, but consistent enough over time to be absolutely fatal. Whoever did this understood pharmacology and toxicology. They knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how long it would take. I stare at the report at the chemical analyses and concentration levels and clinical conclusions that all point to the same inescapable truth. My grandfather was murdered. Slowly, methodically, over the course of 6 months, someone fed him poison disguised as medicine, and he died believing his body was simply giving out from natural causes. That evening, my mother calls again. Her voice sounds hollower now, like the confession drained something essential out of her. "Did you find them?" she asks. "Yes, and you were right." I tell her about the lab results, about the arsenic, about the deliberate dosing that could only have been done by someone with access to his medications. She makes a sound that might be a sob or might be something beyond crying. "I loved him, you know, your grandfather. He was difficult and demanding and sometimes cruel, but he built something real, something that mattered. And I watched your father kill him and I did nothing. Why did you favor Clara?" I ask the question that's haunted me my entire life, finally finding voice. Why did you always choose her over me? My mother is quiet for a long moment. When she speaks again, her voice is barely a whisper. "Your grandfather terrified me," she admits. "He was brilliant, yes, but that brilliance was ruthless. He saw through every lie, every social nicety, every comfortable deception that normal people use to get through life. He was impossible to control, impossible to predict, impossible to manage. And you?" Her voice breaks. "You're exactly like him. From the time you were a little girl, you had that same sharp intelligence, that same ability to see through people's pretenses. Clara is softer, easier, more manageable. I thought if I kept you away from real power, if I made you support staff instead of leader, I could protect this family from the kind of strength that destroys everything around it. But you were wrong," I say flatly. "I was wrong," she agrees. "Your father didn't fear your grandfather's strength when it was building the company. He feared it when it threatened his control. And when your grandfather was dying, when he was weak and confused from the poison, your father saw his chance to take everything. And I let it happen by staying silent. I chose safety over truth, and I've been paying for that choice every day since." I look at the lab report still sitting on my coffee table, at the clinical evidence of murder laid out in neat columns and scientific terminology. "Your grandfather didn't just leave you a company," I say quietly, more to myself than to her. "He left me a murder case." The knowledge that my grandfather was murdered sits in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold, transforming everything I thought I understood about my family. But I can't afford to be paralyzed by grief or shock. If my father killed once to protect his control of the company, there's no telling what he might do if he feels threatened again. I need to move faster, be smarter, and most importantly, I need to understand the full scope of what he's planning. Ethan has been working with Raymond to examine every piece of company governance documentation, looking for the mechanisms my grandfather built into the system. 2 days after I receive the arsenic lab results, Ethan calls me with something he's found buried deep in the corporate bylaws, something so specific that it could only have been designed for exactly this situation. "Section 47, subsection C," Ethan says, and I can hear the excitement in his voice despite the late hour. "Your grandfather embedded it into the bylaws 18 years ago, right around the time he established the trust. Listen to this language. Any chief executive officer who makes unilateral decisions affecting the employment of 100 or more individuals without prior board approval may be subject to an emergency shareholder vote of no confidence callable by any shareholder holding 5% or greater equity." I'm already pulling up the bylaws on my laptop, scrolling to find the section he's reading from. "Clara fired 80 contractors 3 weeks ago." "I know," Ethan says. "But according to the surveillance footage from your grandfather's ring, she's planning something bigger. She had a meeting yesterday with the head of HR and your father. They're drafting termination notices for 120 warehouse workers. The layoffs are scheduled for 3 weeks from now, right after the quarterly earnings report." My fingers freeze on the keyboard. 120 people. 120 families who depend on those paychecks, who have mortgages and children and lives that will be upended because Clara needs to show cost savings she doesn't know how else to achieve. This is exactly what the provision was designed for, I say quietly. Grandpa knew that bad leadership would eventually try to solve problems by firing people instead of fixing systems. But even as I'm processing this legal mechanism that could remove Clara from power, Ethan is already moving on to something else. Something in his tone that tells me the news gets worse. Melissa, there's more. I've been tracing the offshore accounts connected to those fraudulent transactions, the ones they tried to pin on you. I finally broke through the shell company structures, and you need to know what I found. He sends me a series of documents, and as they load on my screen, I feel my blood run cold. The shell companies, Consulting Services, LLC, Advisory Group International. All of them aren't registered to Clara or some anonymous criminal entity. They're registered to holding companies that trace back to my father. Every single fraudulent transaction that was supposed to look like my embezzlement was actually his embezzlement, just with my forged signature to provide cover and a scapegoat if anyone started investigating. He's been stealing from the company for at least 5 years, Ethan explains. Small amounts at first, then larger as he got more confident. The total is somewhere around $8 million, maybe more. But that's not even the worst part. He walks me through what he's discovered by monitoring my father's email account, something Ethan has been doing through a contact in IT who's loyal to me and horrified by what's happening. There's an encrypted email chain between my father and representatives from a Chinese manufacturing conglomerate called Tianlong Industries. The negotiations have been going on for 7 months, starting well before I was terminated, well before Clara became CEO. The deal is straightforward and devastating. Tianlong wants to buy James & Company for $340 million. They'll keep the brand name and some of the management structure, but they'll move most of the manufacturing overseas and eliminate roughly 60% of the current workforce. My father negotiated himself a $25 million advisory fee as part of the transaction plus retention of his equity at the sale price. The entire deal is contingent on having a CEO who will sign the merger agreement without asking too many questions or conducting the kind of due diligence that might expose how badly my father has already looted the company. I read through the email chain with mounting horror and understanding. He needed Clara as CEO because she'd sign whatever he told her to sign. Exactly, Ethan confirms. And he needed you gone because you would have caught all of this. You built the financial systems. You know every account, every vendor relationship, every normal pattern of business. There's no way you wouldn't have noticed $8 million disappearing or questioned why we were suddenly in merger talks with a Chinese company nobody had heard of. I open the surveillance feed from my grandfather's ring, scrolling back through the archived footage until I find what I'm looking for. 3 days ago, Clara took a call in the office from my father. I turn up the volume and watch my sister, who I've spent months hating, sit at the desk that used to be mine and cry while talking to the man who murdered our grandfather. I don't understand these contracts, Dad, Clara says, her voice breaking. The language about asset transfers and workforce reductions, are you sure this is right? It feels like we're selling the company, not partnering with them. My father's voice comes through the phone speaker, and even through the recording, I can hear the cold impatience in his tone. Clara, we've been through this. You're the CEO now, which means you need to trust my guidance on complex strategic matters. Just sign the documents where I've marked them. I'll handle the details. That's what I'm here for. But what about the employees? The email says workforce optimization, but that sounds like layoffs. It's business. Clara, stop being emotional and start being professional. Do you want to run this company or not? There's a long pause, and then Clara says quietly, Yes, Dad. I'm sorry. I'll sign them. I close the laptop and sit in the darkness of my apartment, feeling something shift fundamentally in how I see this whole situation. Clara isn't the villain of this story. She's another victim, just one with less awareness of how she's being used. My father installed her as CEO not because he trusted her or believed in her, but because he knew she'd be easy to control, easy to manipulate, easy to blame when everything eventually fell apart. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I feel something toward my sister that isn't anger or resentment. I feel pity. She wanted so badly to matter, to be valued, to prove she was worthy of leadership. And our father exploited that hunger, used it to turn her into a puppet who would sign away our grandfather's legacy without even understanding what she was doing. My phone buzzes with another message from Ethan. It's a screenshot of an email from my father to the Tianlong representatives sent just yesterday. Once Clara signs the merger documents next month, we're free. Everything will be finalized before anyone realizes what's happening. Melissa would never have agreed to any of this, which is why removing her was essential to the timeline. I stare at that sentence. Melissa would never have agreed. And I feel something crystallize inside me that goes beyond revenge or justice or even grief for my murdered grandfather. My father has been planning this for months, maybe years. He killed his own father-in-law to prevent interference. He framed me for embezzlement to remove me as an obstacle. He manipulated Clara into betraying me so he could use her as a compliant figurehead. And now he's preparing to sell the company my grandfather built, destroy hundreds of jobs, and walk away with $25 million. Not if I stop him first. Understanding my father's true plan changes everything about how I need to proceed. I'm not just fighting to reclaim my position anymore. I'm fighting to prevent the destruction of everything my grandfather built, and to stop a man who's already committed murder from profiting from his crimes. But I also need to be strategic about how Clara fits into this picture. She's complicit, yes, but she's also been manipulated. The question is whether she'll wake up to that manipulation before it's too late. 3 months after my termination, the quarterly earnings report comes out, and the numbers are even worse than I anticipated. First quarter earnings are down 22% compared to the same period last year. The supply chain disruptions I engineered through Clarity Industries are showing their full impact. Now shipments delayed by weeks, orders unfulfilled, clients growing impatient. 2 major accounts, frustrated by missed deadlines and vague explanations, have canceled contracts worth a combined $12 million and moved their business to competitors. The company's credit rating has been downgraded from A to BBB, making it more expensive to borrow money and signaling to the market that James & Company is a company in trouble. The board meeting to discuss these results is, according to Raymond's detailed notes that he shares with me afterward, an absolute disaster. Clara arrives with a prepared presentation blaming the decline on challenging market conditions and disruption caused by recent leadership transitions, which is a thinly veiled accusation that I somehow sabotaged the company on my way out. But when board members start asking specific questions, her facade crumbles completely. Raymond asks which suppliers are causing the delays and whether there's a plan to resolve the issues. Clara stammers, flipping through her presentation slides as if the answer might appear there. She mentions logistics challenges and vendor renegotiations, but can't name a single supplier or explain what's actually being negotiated. Another board member asks about the canceled contracts, wanting to know if there's any possibility of winning the clients back. Clara says her team is exploring options, but admits she hasn't personally spoken to either client. The room grows colder with each vague answer, and Raymond tells me he could literally see confidence draining from the other board members' faces as they realize their CEO doesn't actually understand what's happening to her own company. What I don't expect is how desperately Clara will respond to this pressure. A week after that disastrous board meeting, Ethan's monitoring systems detect unusual activity. Someone is attempting to hack into what they think is my personal computer network using sophisticated techniques that suggest professional expertise rather than amateur curiosity. Ethan watches the intrusion attempt in real time, and what he sees makes him call me immediately. "It's a honeypot scenario," he explains. "I set up a fake network months ago that looks exactly like your real system, complete with dummy files and realistic folder structures. Whoever hired this hacker doesn't know they're infiltrating a decoy." He pauses, and I can hear him typing. "Based on the payment trail, this was arranged by your father but commissioned through Clara's executive discretionary fund. She paid $50,000 for this. For 3 days, I watched through Ethan's monitoring system as the hacker systematically searches through the fake network. He's looking for evidence of sabotage for communications with James & Company suppliers for any proof that I'm actively working to undermine Clara. Every file he accesses gets logged. Every search term he uses gets recorded. Every document he thinks he's deleting is actually being copied and sent to our secure servers. The hacker is essentially giving us a complete map of what Clara fears most, what she thinks I might have, what her strategy is for defending herself. The irony is almost painful. Clara just paid $50,000 to expose her own desperation and paranoia to the person she's trying to investigate. But I'm not content to just watch Clara self-destruct. I need to accelerate the timeline, need to make sure the board and the business community understand what's happening before my father can execute his sale to Tianlong Industries. I compile the most damning information: the financial decline, the leadership chaos, the questions about Clara's qualifications, and I package it carefully into an anonymous tip to a business journalist I know has been covering our industry for years. Marcus Chen is the kind of reporter who doesn't just rewrite press releases. He investigates, asks hard questions, and isn't afraid to publish uncomfortable truths about prominent families. I send him enough information to pique his interest without revealing my involvement. Copies of the board meeting minutes showing Clara's inability to answer basic operational questions, financial data showing the dramatic decline in performance, anonymous quotes from employees expressing concern about leadership stability. Marcus takes the bait. Within a week, an article appears in the Business Chronicle with the headline, "Family Business in Turmoil, Insiders Question New CEO's Qualifications." The piece is devastating in its professional restraint. Marcus doesn't make wild accusations or speculate about scandals. He simply lays out the facts. Clara James, with no prior operational experience, took over as CEO 3 months ago. Since then, earnings have dropped. 22% major clients have departed, and multiple sources describe a leadership vacuum where strategic decisions should be happening. The article includes a paragraph about me noting that the previous CFO had a strong track record of operational excellence and strategic planning before her unexpected departure, right before Clara's appointment. The article carefully avoids saying anything legally actionable, but the implication is clear: James & Company replaced competence with nepotism, and the company is paying the price. I'm watching the surveillance feed from my grandfather's ring when Clara reads the article. She's alone in the office, and I watch her face change as she scrolls through the piece on her laptop. First confusion, then recognition, then fury. She reads it twice, her hands shaking, and then she does something I've never seen her do before. She actually screams with rage and frustration, and throws her laptop across the office. It hits the wall and falls to the floor. The screen cracking with an audible sound, the ring's microphone picks up clearly. "This is Melissa," Clara says to the empty room, her voice ragged. "This is her doing. She's destroying me, and I can't even prove it. I can't prove any of it." She collapses into the chair that used to be mine, puts her head in her hands, and cries with the kind of desperate, hopeless sobs that suggest she's finally understanding how far out of her depth she really is. I close the surveillance feed and sit back, and despite everything Clara has done to me, despite the humiliation of that Thanksgiving dinner and the coldness of her announcement that I was being fired, I feel something uncomfortable twist in my chest. I pull up the financial records from the hacker's activities, the $50,000 payment that Clara authorized from her executive discretionary account, and I think about how that money just bought me a complete map of her strategy and her fears. She paid me to expose her. And I'm not even close to done yet. The article's impact ripples through the business community faster than I anticipated, and Clara's response is exactly what I expect from someone drowning and grasping at anything that looks like a lifeline. 2 weeks after the Business Chronicle piece runs, Clara's publicity team sends out a press release announcing that James & Company has attracted interest from a major Singaporean investment firm called Apex Capital Partners. According to the release, Apex is prepared to invest $25 million for a 15% equity stake, demonstrating strong confidence in the company's leadership and future growth potential. I read the press release 3 times, recognizing my father's fingerprints all over it. This is damage control, an attempt to counter the negative press with a story of validation and momentum. Clara is betting everything on this announcement, restoring confidence in her leadership, proving that despite the operational problems and the critical articles, sophisticated investors still believe in the company's future. What Clara doesn't know is that Apex Capital Partners doesn't exist. Or rather, it exists only as a shell entity that Ethan created specifically for this purpose, complete with a professional website, a Singapore business registration, and a distinguished-looking representative named James Chen, who is actually a corporate actor, Ethan found through a contact in Los Angeles. James specializes in playing executives and business people for training videos and corporate events, and for $15,000 plus expenses, he's agreed to play the role of his career. Clara announces a press conference at the downtown Marquis Hotel, one of those generic but expensive venues that companies use when they want to project success and stability. She invites business media, all board members, key clients who haven't left yet, and even some analysts who cover the manufacturing sector. I received the invitation too, forwarded by Raymond with a brief note. She's trying to prove something. This could backfire spectacularly. For 48 hours, Clara lives in the fantasy of her redemption story. According to surveillance footage from the office, she has new marketing materials printed with both company logos, commissions, a video presentation about synergies and growth opportunities, and even hires a publicist to help manage the media narrative. I watch her rehearse her speech over and over in the empty office, adjusting her tone, practicing her smile, trying to project the confidence of someone who has everything under control. The night before the press conference, I sit in my apartment and feel something uncomfortable churning in my stomach. What I'm about to do is cruel in a way that goes beyond business strategy. This is personal humiliation on a public stage, the kind of moment that doesn't just damage a career, but leaves psychological scars. For a moment, I consider calling it off, telling Ethan to have James Chen simply not show up to let Clara's press conference proceed and succeed or fail on its own merits. But then I remember 400 people losing their jobs, so Clara could show cost savings she didn't understand. I remember my grandfather being slowly poisoned, while my father positioned himself to steal everything. I remember that Thanksgiving dinner when Clara looked at me with cold triumph and announced my termination like it was something to celebrate. I don't call it off. The press conference begins exactly as planned. Clara takes the podium in a navy suit that probably cost more than most of the laid-off workers made in a month, and she delivers her prepared remarks about the company's bright future and strategic vision. She's nervous, I can see that even through the live stream I'm watching, but she's holding it together. Then she introduces James Chen, representative of Apex Capital Partners, and invites him to say a few words about why his firm is excited to partner with James & Combine. James approaches the podium with the kind of easy confidence that comes from years of playing authority figures. He's distinguished-looking, probably mid-50s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. He smiles at the cameras, acknowledges Clara with a polite nod, and then his expression shifts into something more serious. "I appreciate the invitation to speak today," he says, his accent carrying just a hint of British education that adds to his credibility. "However, I need to clarify something. After extensive due diligence over the past 2 weeks, Apex Capital Partners has decided not to proceed with this investment." The room goes completely silent. I watch Clara's face on the screen, see the exact moment she processes what he just said. Her smile freezes, then falters, then disappears entirely. James continues, his tone professional but damning. "We've identified significant operational concerns and questions about financial transparency that make this opportunity too risky for our fund. We wish James & Company well in their future endeavors, but we cannot in good conscience commit capital to an organization with such unclear leadership direction." He collects his papers, nods politely to the stunned audience, and walks out of the ballroom. For maybe 10 seconds, nobody moves. Then the cameras start flashing, reporters start shouting questions, and Clara just stands there at the podium, frozen, her carefully prepared triumph disintegrating in real time. I'm watching from my home office, and Ethan is sitting beside me, his expression uncomfortable. He's been quiet since the press conference started, and now he finally speaks. "Wasn't that too cruel?" he asks quietly. "She's your sister." I close the laptop and my voice comes out colder than I intend. "She fired 400 people without a second thought. Workers with families, mortgages, medical bills they can't pay now. Where was mercy then? Where was consideration for what public termination feels like when she announced my firing at Thanksgiving dinner in front of our entire family?" "So this is revenge," Ethan says. "No," I correct him. "This is education. Clara needed to know what it feels like when your world collapses in public, when everyone is watching, when there's nowhere to hide from your humiliation. Now she knows." But even as I say the words, even as I defend the calculated cruelty of what I just orchestrated, I feel something hollow opening up inside me. Revenge doesn't taste the way I thought it would. It doesn't feel like justice or vindication. It just feels empty, like I've spent something precious that I can never get back. That evening, long after the press conference has ended and the story has spread across business news websites, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. It's James Chen, the actor, messaging from a burner phone. The message is brief. "She cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes after. Just thought you should know." I stare at that text for a long time, imagining my sister locked in a hotel bathroom, mascara running, trying to pull herself together enough to face the reporters and board members and clients who just watched her most public moment of validation turn into her most public humiliation. And I wonder, not for the first time, if the person I'm becoming in this fight is someone my grandfather would actually be proud of. The fake investor humiliation serves its purpose, accelerating Clara's decline and making the board even more nervous about her leadership. But public embarrassment isn't enough. I need actual control, and over the 4 months since my termination, I've been systematically building exactly that through Clarity Industries. The supply chain strategy I implemented back in Part 6 has now reached its full devastating potential, and James & Company is discovering what it means to operate a manufacturing company without the relationships and infrastructure that actually make manufacturing possible. Robertson. Materials. Our former primary supplier of raw materials now works almost exclusively with Clarity. I offered them something they'd been wanting for years. Reliable payment terms at 45 days, instead of the 60-day terms Clara imposed, guaranteed minimum order volumes that let them plan their own production schedules, and a 3-year contract that gives them the security to invest in expanding their capacity. They didn't just switch to Clarity, they prioritized us completely, which means when James & Co. places orders. Now, Robertson tells them there's a 6-week backlog. Landmark Logistics, which handles warehousing and distribution, signed a 3-year exclusive partnership with Clarity, after I personally guaranteed funding for 20% of their fleet modernization costs. It was a $2 million investment, but it bought me complete control over the logistics network that James & Company depends on. Without Landmark, the company has to use smaller, less reliable logistics providers who charge premium rates and can't handle the volume. The third supplier, Precision Components, was more complicated. They manufacture specialized parts that are difficult to source elsewhere, which gave them leverage. So instead of just offering them better terms, I offered them equity. 5% of Clarity Industries in exchange for exclusive supply rights. The owner, a pragmatic woman named Patricia Chen, who's been in manufacturing for 30 years, did the math and realized that 5% of a growing company was worth more than ongoing contracts with a failing one. She signed the exclusivity agreement, and just like that, James & Company lost access to components they literally cannot source from anyone else without months of qualification and testing. By mid-March, 4 months after my termination, James & Company has lost 70% of its supply chain capacity. Orders that should take 2 weeks to fulfill are taking 6 weeks. Projects are delayed so long that clients are threatening to cancel and demand refunds. The company's reputation for reliability, built over 50 years, is disintegrating in real time. And Clara has absolutely no idea why it's happening, because she never bothered to learn who these suppliers were or why the relationships mattered. According to Raymond's reports from board meetings, Clara keeps insisting it's temporary market disruptions or industry-wide supply issues. But board members are starting to ask why competitors don't seem to be having the same problems. Why is Clarity Industries, a company that barely existed 6 months ago, apparently thriving while James & Combe can't get basic materials delivered on time? This is when my father makes his move, and I have to admit, if I didn't know his real agenda, it would almost look like he's trying to help. He comes to Clara with a solution, a new supplier consortium that's offering immediate capacity at competitive rates. The entity is called Strategic Supply Solutions, and according to the proposal, my father shows Clara, they can provide everything James & Company needs: raw materials, logistics, specialized components, all through a single integrated contract. I know about this meeting because the surveillance system in the office captures everything. I watch Clara, exhausted and desperate, listen to my father's pitch. The contract he puts in front of her is 60 pages of dense legal language, the kind of document that should be reviewed by multiple attorneys before anyone signs it. But my father assures her it's standard industry terminology, that he's already had their lawyers look at it, that they need to move quickly before the consortium's capacity gets allocated to other clients. Clara, who hasn't slept properly in weeks and is terrified of losing more clients, signs it without reading it carefully. She flips through the page's initials where my father indicates and puts her signature on the final page. The whole process takes less than 15 minutes. What Clara doesn't realize, what she would have discovered if she'd actually read Section 12, Subsection 4, is that Strategic Supply Solutions is a wholly owned subsidiary of Clarity Industries, and buried in the operational terms is a clause granting the supplier operational input rights on production decisions to ensure quality standards and delivery compliance. In plain English, that means Clarity Industries, which means I now have veto power over James & Company's manufacturing decisions. We can delay production for quality concerns. We can require consultation with management before any major orders proceed. We can essentially control when and how James & Company fulfills its obligations to clients. Clara has just signed operational control of the company to me without knowing it. The trap springs 2 weeks later when James & Company's biggest client, Hartwell Manufacturing, places a rush order for a project they need completed in 3 weeks instead of the usual 6. It's the kind of request that companies accommodate for their best clients, the kind of favor that maintains relationships. Clara, desperate to show she can still deliver results, promises it will be done. But when the production team submits the order to Strategic Supply Solutions, they receive a response citing quality assurance concerns that require additional consultation with supply chain management. The production gets delayed pending review. Clara, furious and confused, demands to speak with whoever runs Strategic Supply Solutions. The next day, a formal letter arrives on Clarity Industries' letterhead. It explains in polite corporate language that Strategic Supply Solutions is a division of Clarity Industries, and per the contract Clara signed, all production decisions affecting client commitments require advance consultation to ensure the supplier can meet quality and timeline standards. The letter offers to schedule a meeting to discuss the Hartwell order, but notes that given current capacity constraints, a 3-week timeline may not be feasible. The signature at the bottom of the letter reads, Ethan Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Clarity Industries. I'm not there to see Clara's face when she reads it, but the surveillance footage captures her reaction. She reads the letter twice, her hands starting to shake. Then she pulls out the contract she signed and starts flipping through pages with increasing desperation, finally landing on Section 12. She reads it once, then again, and I see the exact moment understanding hits her. She sets the contract down carefully, like it might explode if she moves too quickly, and she whispers to the empty office, "She owns us now." I'm in my own office at Clarity Industries when Ethan brings me a copy of the signed contract, Clara's signature clear and legally binding on the final page. I review Section 12 one more time, confirming what I already know. James & Company cannot operate without going through us, cannot fulfill client orders without our approval, cannot make strategic production decisions without our consultation. I allow myself a thin smile, the first genuine one I've had in weeks. She just signed her company over to me, I say quietly. Ethan doesn't look as pleased as I expected. What happens now? I close the contract and look at him. Now we wait for her to make one more mistake. Then we end this. With operational control secured through the supply chain contracts, I have Clara trapped in a situation she can't escape through business maneuvering alone. Now it's time to use the legal mechanism my grandfather built specifically for this moment. Raymond and I coordinate the timing carefully, ensuring that everything happens exactly according to corporate bylaws, so there's no procedural ground for challenge. The James Family Trust, acting through Barrett and Associates as legal representatives, files a formal request for an emergency shareholder meeting to address concerns about CEO performance and governance violations. The notice arrives at James & Company headquarters on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier and requiring a signature. Clara opens it in her office, and according to the surveillance feed, I watch her face go from confused to alarmed as she reads the formal legal language. The James Family Trust holder of 40% of company shares hereby requests an emergency meeting of shareholders to vote on a motion of no confidence in current CEO leadership, citing violations of Section 47 of corporate bylaws regarding unilateral employment decisions affecting over 100 individuals without board approval. The notice is required by law to be delivered 48 hours before the meeting, which means Clara has exactly 2 days to figure out what's happening and mount some kind of defense. I watch her immediately pick up the phone and call my father, her voice high and panicked. "Dad, I just got a legal notice about the family trust calling an emergency meeting. What is this? You told me the trust was just some old paperwork Grandpa set up that didn't matter anymore." I can't hear my father's side of the conversation, but I can see Clara's reactions, her confusion deepening, her panic rising. She's saying things like, 40%, and they can remove me, and who controls it? My father apparently has no answers because Clara hangs up and immediately calls the company's legal department, demanding they investigate the trust immediately and find a way to block the meeting. Over the next 48 hours, according to Raymond, who's monitoring the situation from inside, Clara and my father hire 3 different law firms to examine the trust structure and look for procedural vulnerabilities. But my grandfather's attorneys were too good. The trust is ironclad, properly structured, legally unassailable. The bylaws clearly grant shareholders with 5% or more the right to call emergency meetings under specific circumstances. And Clara's termination of 120 warehouse workers without board approval meets those circumstances exactly. There's no legal ground to challenge the meeting or prevent it from happening. The morning of the meeting, I dress carefully in a navy suit that projects authority without arrogance, professional competence without theatricality. I want to walk into that room looking like someone who belongs there, someone who never should have been forced to leave. Ethan offers to come with me, but I tell him this is something I need to do alone. This is about my grandfather's company, my family, and the legacy I'm reclaiming. The conference room at James & Company headquarters is packed when I arrive, though I wait outside until the meeting officially begins. Through the small window in the door, I can see board members, major shareholders, company attorneys, and Clara sitting at the head of the long table. She's wearing a black suit that makes her look like she's attending a funeral, which perhaps she is in a way. Her face is pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. My father sits beside her, his expression carefully neutral, but his jaw tight with tension. Raymond calls the meeting to order at exactly 10 a.m. His voice carries through the door, formal and authoritative. "This emergency session has been called by the James Family Trust to address concerns about company leadership and governance. The trust holds 40% voting shares in James & Company, and per Section 47 of company bylaws, has the right to call for a vote of no confidence in CEO performance when specific conditions are met." Clara tries to interrupt, her voice sharp. "I don't recognize the authority of this trust to call meetings. We don't even know who controls it or whether it's legitimate." Raymond doesn't let her finish. "The trust's legal standing has been verified by Barrett and Associates and reviewed by our corporate counsel. It is absolutely legitimate and its voting rights are unquestionable." He pauses, consulting his notes. The trust alleges that CEO Clara James has made material decisions affecting over 100 employees without proper board authorization, specifically the termination of 120 warehouse workers scheduled for implementation next week. This constitutes a direct violation of company bylaws. That's my cue. I push open the conference room doors and walk in. The reaction is immediate and dramatic. Heads turn, people gasp. I hear someone say, "Oh my God," in a voice that might be genuine shock or might be satisfaction. Board members who've known me for years stand up instinctively, old habits of respect taking over. Clara's face goes completely white, all the blood draining as she stares at me like I'm a ghost returned from the dead. "What are you doing here?" She stammers, her voice barely above a whisper. I walk to the empty seat directly across from her and set down my leather portfolio with deliberate calm. I'm representing the James Family Trust. As of 2 weeks ago, I am the designated controller of the trust's voting rights per the terms my grandfather established 20 years ago. I open the portfolio and remove the legal documents Barrett prepared, sliding them across the table toward Raymond and the corporate attorneys. These papers verify my legal standing. The trust holds 40% of this company's shares, and I'm here to exercise my voting rights. The room erupts in whispers, board members leaning toward each other, lawyers examining the documents with practiced speed. My father's face has gone rigid, and I can see him calculating, trying to find an angle, trying to figure out how this happened without him knowing. I look directly at Clara, holding her gaze across the table. I believe there's a motion on the floor regarding leadership. I'd like to call for a vote. Clara doesn't move for a long moment. Then she speaks, and her voice carries a strange mixture of hurt and reluctant admiration. You planned this from the beginning. I don't confirm or deny. I just look at her with the calm expression I've practiced for exactly this moment. The motion is to remove Clara James as CEO for violations of corporate governance, Raymond says formally. All in favor. Raymond is about to formally state the motion when Clara suddenly pushes back her chair and stands up so abruptly that it scrapes across the floor with a harsh sound that makes several people flinch. Her face has gone from pale to flushed, and I can see desperation replacing the shock that froze her moments ago. "This is fraud!" She shouts, her voice louder than necessary in the confined space. "That trust document is fake. My father told me grandfather never set up anything like that. He would have mentioned it would have told the family about something that important." She looks wildly around the room, making eye contact with board members, searching for support for someone who will believe her. This is Melissa's revenge scheme. Don't you see? She's forged documents to steal the company because she's angry about being terminated. She probably created this fake trust months ago, planned this whole thing. My father leans toward her, tries to put a hand on her arm to calm her down, but she shakes him off. Her lawyer, a young man named David Preston who looks completely unprepared for this level of drama, clears his throat and stands as well. "We request a 30-day postponement to properly authenticate these trust documents," he says, trying to sound authoritative, but mostly sounding uncertain. Given the serious nature of Ms. Clara James's allegations, surely the board agrees that some due diligence is appropriate before proceeding with such a consequential vote. I watch several board members nod, see them whispering to each other. The accusation is serious enough that demanding verification seems reasonable, even prudent. This is exactly the kind of delaying tactic that could derail everything, give my father time to mount a real defense, possibly even find some procedural way to challenge the trust's validity. Raymond looks at me questioningly, and I can see the concern in his eyes. He's asking silently if I have an answer to this, if there's a way to proceed that won't make the board look reckless or legally vulnerable. For a moment, I let the silence hang in the room. Let Clara think she's found a lifeline. Let my father believe his daughter's desperate gambit might actually work. Then I reach into my portfolio and pull out my laptop, setting it on the table with calm deliberation. "I anticipated this accusation," I say quietly, my voice cutting through the tension. "So I brought additional verification." I connect my laptop to the conference room's display system, and the large screen on the wall flickers to life. I navigate to a video file, and before I press play, I look directly at Clara one more time. My grandfather knew someone might question the trust's legitimacy, so he created supplementary evidence 15 years ago, long before any of this current situation existed. I press play. The video quality is older, the colors slightly washed out in the way that footage from 15 years ago always looks, but the image is clear. My grandfather sits in his study, the same room where I remember spending Sunday afternoons as a teenager, while he taught me about business and integrity, and the difference between power and authority. He's wearing a cardigan, I remember, and behind him I can see the bookshelf with his collection of manufacturing journals. The timestamp in the corner reads November 2008. "I am Arthur James, founder of James & Co., his voice says, and hearing it again after all these years makes my throat tight. This recording serves as supplementary evidence for the James Family Trust, which I established in 2005. The trust holds 40% of company shares designated for specific purposes and under specific conditions." He pauses, looks directly into the camera with those sharp eyes that never missed anything. Control of this trust passes to my grandchild, who demonstrates both capability and integrity in service to the company, and who is unjustly removed from leadership by family politics rather than performance. If you're watching this recording, it means those conditions have been met. Another pause, and then his expression becomes almost gentle, the way he used to look at me when I was young and he was teaching me something important. "If anyone questions this recording's authenticity or claims the trust is fabricated, tell them to check the birthmark on Melissa's left wrist. It's a small crescent shape on the inner wrist. Only I and her mother knew about it. I never told anyone else, not even Melissa herself knows I noticed it. That detail cannot be fabricated after the fact." The video ends and the room is absolutely silent. I look toward the back of the conference room where my mother is sitting, having arrived quietly, sometime during the meeting. Her hand is covering her mouth, and I can see tears streaming down her face. She knows about the birthmark. She was there when I was born, when my grandfather first saw it and told her it looked like a little moon. I don't say anything. I simply reach across the table and slowly roll up the left sleeve of my suit jacket, then the cuff of my blouse underneath. I turn my wrist so everyone in the room can see the inner side. There, just below my wrist bone, is a small crescent-shaped birthmark, pale brown against my skin. Exactly as my grandfather described. Exactly in the place he specified. A detail that I've never thought about, never mentioned to anyone, never considered significant until this exact moment, when it becomes the irrefutable proof of everything. Raymond leans forward, studying the birthmark, then looks at the frozen image of my grandfather on the screen. He nods slowly, understanding settling over his features. The company's head lawyer, Richard Morrison, motions for my laptop. "May I examine the video file's metadata?" I hand him the computer without hesitation. He spends 3 minutes checking timestamps, file properties, digital signatures. Finally, he looks up and speaks in the careful, precise way that lawyers use when stating facts that cannot be disputed. "This file was created in November 2008. The metadata is consistent with that date. There are no signs of alteration, no evidence of recent editing, no indication that the video has been manipulated in any way. Based on my examination, this recording is authentic." Clara sinks back into her chair like someone has cut the strings holding her upright. All the fight, all the desperate energy that animated her accusation drains away completely. She looks at me across the table, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I see her truly understand that she's lost. Not just this vote, not just the CEO position, but the entire war she didn't even know she was fighting. My father's face has gone rigid, his eyes moving between the birthmark on my wrist and the frozen image of his father-in-law on the screen. He's calculating, I can see it, trying to find some other angle, some other way to challenge this. But there isn't one. The evidence is irrefutable, the video is authentic, and the birthmark is impossible to fake retroactively. Raymond clears his throat and looks at the board secretary, a quiet woman named Margaret who's been taking minutes. Margaret, please formally state the motion and call for a vote. Margaret's voice is steady and clear. The motion is to remove Clara James as Chief Executive Officer of James & Company for violations of corporate governance bylaws. All in favor of removing Clara James as CEO. Hands rise around the conference table. Raymond's hand goes up first, steady and certain. Then 3 other board members follow, longtime members who remember my grandfather and understand what this company was supposed to be. Margaret counts proxy votes from smaller shareholders who couldn't attend but submitted their positions in advance. The final tally takes less than 2 minutes to calculate. 68% in favor of removal, Margaret announces in her clear professional voice. The motion passes. Clara James is removed as Chief Executive Officer effective immediately. Clara doesn't move. She sits perfectly still in her chair, staring at the table in front of her, like if she doesn't look up, doesn't acknowledge what just happened, maybe it won't be real. My father's hand is on her shoulder, but she doesn't seem to notice. The fight has gone out of her completely. Raymond turns to me, his expression carefully neutral despite what I suspect is relief underneath. Does the trust have a nomination for replacement leadership? I stand, and the formality of the moment feels surreal after months of operating in shadows and through proxies. I nominate myself as Interim Chief Executive Officer subject to board approval until permanent leadership can be properly evaluated through normal governance processes. Second, Raymond says immediately. All in favor of appointing Melissa James as Interim CEO? Margaret asks. More hands rise this time. Even board members who seemed uncertain about removing Clara apparently have no problem with me taking over. The final vote is 71% in favor. Just like that, with 2 votes taking less than 5 minutes combined, I've reclaimed the position that was stolen from me 4 months ago. But as I sit back down and accept quiet congratulations from Raymond and other board members as I watch Clara gather her things and leave the conference room without looking at anyone, I don't feel the triumph I expected. I feel exhausted, hollow, like I've been running for months and finally stopped only to discover I'm not sure where I was running to or why it mattered so much. The meeting adjourns and people file out slowly, some approaching to shake my hand or welcome me back, others leaving quickly as if they're uncomfortable with the family drama they just witnessed. My father leaves without speaking to me, his arm around Clara as he guides her out. My mother approaches hesitantly, and for a moment I think she might say something, but she just looks at me with an expression I can't read, and then follows my father and Clara out of the building. That evening, I sit alone in my apartment, surrounded by the paperwork from the meeting official vote tallies, board resolutions, the legal documents confirming my appointment as CEO. I should feel victorious. I should feel vindicated. Instead, I feel like I need to understand something that's been bothering me since I watched Clara's face go blank in that conference room. I pull out the manila envelope Barrett gave me weeks ago, the one containing my grandfather's full letter. I've read most of it already, the parts about the trust and his reasoning for creating it, and his hope that I would be the one to inherit his legacy. But there's a section I haven't opened yet, a separate sealed envelope marked in his handwriting, "Open only after reclaiming leadership." I break the seal with shaking hands and unfold the single page inside. "Melissa," it begins, "if you're reading this, you've won. You've taken back what was stolen from you, you've exposed whatever conspiracy pushed you out, and you're now in a position to lead the company I built. I'm proud of you for that. But I need to ask you something important. How did you win?" I keep reading, my grandfather's voice so clear in my mind that I can almost hear him speaking the words. "I've seen what revenge does to people. I've watched it hollow them out from the inside until victory tastes like ashes and power feels like burden. The company's future matters, yes, but it matters less than the person you've become in fighting for it. The real test of character isn't whether you can take power back. It's whether you can use that power better than the people who abused it." His handwriting becomes slightly shakier here, as if this part was harder for him to write. "I built this company with ruthlessness when I needed to. I made hard decisions. I hurt people sometimes in service of business goals. And I've spent the last 20 years of my life wondering if that ruthlessness corrupted something essential in me, if I became the kind of person who valued winning more than being worthy of winning. Don't make my mistakes, Melissa. Don't let the fight to reclaim something good turn you into someone who isn't. The final paragraph is underlined, emphasized as if he needed me to really hear this part. Make me proud by being merciful where others were cruel. Make me proud by using your victory to heal rather than harm. Make me proud by proving that justice and compassion aren't opposites, that you can be strong and kind, that you can win without destroying everything around you. The company will survive or fail based on business decisions, but your character will define who you become in the years after this fight is over. Choose wisely. I set down the letter and close my eyes, and all I can see is the sequence of moves I made over the past 4 months. The fake investor who humiliated Clara in front of the press. The supply chain trap that strangled the company she was trying to run. The surveillance, the manipulation, the calculated cruelty of watching her fail and doing nothing to help, even when I could see she was drowning. I won. But did I win the way my grandfather would have wanted? Or did I just become another version of the people who hurt me, justified by righteousness, but ultimately driven by the same impulse to dominate and punish? The question sits in my chest like a weight, and I don't have an answer. My phone buzzes on the coffee table, pulling me out of my thoughts. It's a text from a number I don't recognize, but the message makes my blood run cold. This is Mercy General Hospital. Clara James has been admitted to the emergency department. You're listed as her emergency contact. Please call this number immediately. I stare at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Clara listed me as her emergency contact. Not our father. Not our mother. Me. The sister she fired, the sister she tried to destroy, the sister who just took everything from her in that conference room. I grab my keys and I'm out the door before I consciously decide to go, before I can think about what this means, or why I'm running to help someone who showed me no mercy when she had power over me. All I know is that my grandfather's letter is still sitting on my coffee table, and his words about mercy and compassion are echoing in my head as I drive toward the hospital through dark streets, not knowing what I'll find when I get there. I'm halfway to the hospital when my phone rings with a call from the forensic lab. The toxicologist who analyzed my grandfather's medication bottles has completed the official report and wants to discuss the findings with me directly. I pull over into a parking lot, hands already shaking before I even answer the call. Some instinct telling me that whatever she's about to say will change everything. The report she emails while we're on the phone is dense with technical terminology and chemical analysis, but the conclusion is unambiguous. Chronic arsenic poisoning administered over approximately 6 months before death. The pattern of dosing indicates deliberate, calculated poisoning specifically designed to mimic the symptoms of progressive heart failure. The toxicologist's voice is professional, but carries an edge of something darker, as she explains that the doses were carefully calibrated to be fatal over time, but not immediately suspicious, avoiding the acute symptoms that might have triggered investigation. This wasn't accidental exposure or environmental contamination, she says. Whoever did this had knowledge of medicine or chemistry. They knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how long it would take. I sit in my car reading the report 3 times, the words blurring as tears I didn't know I was crying make it hard to see. My grandfather was murdered. Not just killed, but slowly, methodically poisoned over half a year, while everyone who loved him watched him deteriorate and believed it was just his heart giving out. I think about those last months visiting him in the hospital, holding his hand while he struggled to breathe, listening to doctors talk about cardiac decline as if it were inevitable. And all the while, someone was feeding him poison. The hospital can wait. Clara can wait. Right now, I need answers from the one person who might have them. I drive to my parents' house, the estate where I grew up, where that terrible Thanksgiving dinner happened 4 months ago. My mother answers the door in a bathrobe, even though it's early evening, and I'm struck by how much older she looks, how fragile, as if the stress of the past months has aged her a decade. "You knew," I say without preamble, holding up the lab report. You knew he was being poisoned. Her face crumbles and she starts crying before I even finish the sentence. I suspected, she whispers. The symptoms didn't make sense for heart disease. The confusion, the tremors, the way his personality changed those last months. But I had no proof, and your father kept telling me I was paranoid that grief was making me see things that weren't there. You were afraid of him, I say, understanding settling over me like cold water. She nods, pulling her bathrobe tighter around herself. If I accused him without evidence, if I was wrong, he'd never forgive me. But if I was right... She trails off, unable to finish the thought. If you were right, it meant you were married to a murderer. I finish for her. It meant the man you'd shared your life with was capable of killing his own father-in-law for money and control. I didn't know what to do, she says, and her voice breaks completely. I was afraid if I pushed too hard, if I threatened to expose him, he might hurt me or hurt you girls. I just knew that if he could poison someone he'd known for 40 years, someone who trusted him, then what else was he capable of? I look at this woman who gave birth to me, who favored my sister my entire life, who stood by silently while I was betrayed and humiliated. And I see not a villain, but another victim trapped by fear and complicity in something she didn't know how to stop. I'm going to the police, I tell her. I have to. Grandpa deserves justice and Dad needs to be stopped before he hurts anyone else. I expect her to argue, to beg me to reconsider, to protect the family name one more time, but she just nods slowly, almost with relief. I know, she says. I've been waiting 15 years for someone to be brave enough to do what I couldn't. I turn to leave the lab report heavy in my hand when my mother grabs my arm with surprising strength. Wait, she says urgently. There's something else you need to know. Clara didn't just stumble into the CEO position. Your father has been grooming her for this since she was 20 years old. Her voice drops to barely a whisper. He told me years ago, back when you were both still in college, Clara will do whatever I say. Melissa never would. He chose her specifically because she was easier to control. Everything that's happened, it was all planned. My mother's revelation about my father's long manipulation of Clara reframes everything I thought I understood about my sister's betrayal, but before I can fully process what it means, I get a call from the hospital saying Clara has been discharged and left without speaking to anyone. The emergency that brought her there turned out to be a severe panic attack, not a medical crisis. But the fact that she's now somewhere alone and spiraling worries me more than I want to admit. I don't hear anything for 2 days. Then at 2:30 in the morning, my phone explodes with notifications. The company warehouse alarm system, the new security infrastructure I had installed through Clarity Industries during the transition, is sending emergency alerts. Fire detection activated. Suppression system engaged. Police and fire department automatically notified. And most damning of all, live security footage uploading to the cloud in real time. I pull up the feed on my phone with shaking hands, and what I see makes my blood run cold. Clara's car in the parking lot. Clara entering through the side door using an access code that should have been deactivated when she was removed as CEO, but apparently wasn't due to some administrative oversight. Clara carrying 2 red containers that are obviously gasoline moving through the warehouse toward the record storage area where we keep physical copies of contracts, financial documents, everything that might be used as evidence in the fraud investigation I know is coming. The footage is crystal clear, high-definition cameras capturing every detail. I watch my sister pour gasoline across the floor in the storage area. Her movements jerky and desperate. Nothing like the composed woman who announced my firing 4 months ago. She's crying. I can see that even through the grainy night vision quality of the feed, and she keeps stopping as if she's reconsidering, then forcing herself to continue. When she pulls out a lighter, I actually say, "Don't," out loud to my empty apartment, as if she can hear me, as if I can stop what I'm watching happen in real time. The flame catches, and for maybe 2 seconds, there's actual fire spreading across the gasoline trail she's laid. Then the building's state-of-the-art fire suppression system activates with a force that's clearly visible even on camera. chemical retardant floods the area, thick white foam that smothers the flames instantly before they can spread to anything that matters. Alarms start, blaring lights flash, and Clara stands frozen in the middle of it all, covered in foam and gasoline, her face a mask of shock and horror as she realizes what she's just done. She runs. I watch her drop the gas container and sprint for the exit, but she's disoriented by the foam and the alarms and her own panic. By the time she makes it to her car, police lights are already visible in the distance. The security system automatically notified emergency services the moment the fire detection activated. Clara sits in her car for maybe 30 seconds, and I can see her hands gripping the steering wheel, and I think she's trying to decide whether to run or stay. She's still sitting there when the police arrive. I'm at the warehouse within 20 minutes, arriving just as they're loading Clara into a police car. She's in handcuffs, her clothes and hair soaked with chemical retardant, and she's crying so hard she can barely stand. Our father is there too, shouting about lawyers and false arrest and harassment, but the police ignore him. The evidence is too clear, too documented, too irrefutable. A detective named Morrison approaches me, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes that suggest she's seen too many family tragedies play out in criminal investigations. She shows me the search warrant for Clara's phone executed on scene and the preliminary findings that make this so much worse than simple arson. Clara called the insurance company 2 hours before driving to the warehouse. The call logs show she asked specific questions about fire damage claims, payout timelines, what documentation would be needed. Her browser history shows searches for how long for insurance to pay fire claim and can CEO claim company fire damage, and arson investigation, how do they prove it? She was trying to commit insurance fraud, Morrison says flatly. This wasn't just about destroying evidence. She was planning to make a claim on the fire damage to extract money from the insurance payout. Combined with the arson itself, we're looking at multiple felonies. I watch them put Clara in the police car, and I feel something complicated twist in my chest. This is justice, yes. This is Clara facing consequences for her actions. But it's also my sister, the little girl I grew up with, so desperate and so manipulated by our father that she's destroyed her entire life trying to protect herself from consequences he created. She's been asking for you, Morrison says, pulling me back to the present. Since we arrested her, she keeps saying she needs to talk to her sister. She says you're the only one who can help her now. I look at the detective, then at the police car where Clara sits hunched over in the back seat, and I think about my grandfather's letter telling me to be merciful where others were cruel. Can I see her? I ask. Morrison studies my face for a long moment, then nods. 5 minutes. We haven't officially processed her yet. She opens the car door and Clara looks up at me with red, swollen eyes, and the first words out of her mouth are, "I'm sorry. God, Melissa, I'm so sorry for everything." Those 5 minutes in the police car with Clara changed something fundamental in how I see this entire situation. She's not my enemy anymore if she ever really was. She's another casualty of our father's ambition and manipulation, and watching her face criminal charges for crimes she committed while trying to escape the trap he built around her feels less like justice and more like allowing him to claim one more victim. The arraignment happens 3 days later. Clara is formally charged with attempted arson, attempted insurance fraud, and destruction of corporate property. Her court-appointed lawyer, a tired-looking public defender named Sarah Chen, argues that Clara was experiencing a mental health crisis and poses no flight risk. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Rodriguez, counters by pointing out that Clara has access to family wealth and international business connections through her father that make her exactly the kind of defendant who might flee the jurisdiction. The judge sets bail at $500,000, an amount that should be trivial for a family like ours. But when Clara's lawyer contacts my parents, they refuse to post it. My father claims they're cash poor due to the company's financial troubles, a statement so transparently false that even the judge raises an eyebrow. Everyone in that courtroom knows my father has money hidden in offshore accounts, money he embezzled from the company money he's protecting while his daughter sits in county jail. Clara spends 3 days there before I make a decision that Ethan argues against for an hour. I post her bail myself using funds from the trust. When Clara walks out of detention and sees me waiting, she doesn't say anything. She just starts crying again and hugs me in a way she hasn't since we were children before competition and favoritism and our father's manipulation turned us into adversaries. The preliminary hearing 2 weeks later is my opportunity to either destroy Clara completely or give her a chance at something resembling redemption. I'm called as a witness to testify about the surveillance system and Clara's potential motives. The prosecutor wants me to establish premeditation to paint Clara as a calculating criminal who planned the arson carefully and deliberately. I could do that. I could describe how she researched insurance claims, how she drove 30 miles to buy gasoline with cash, how she chose 2 a.m. specifically to avoid detection. I could emphasize every detail that makes her look like a criminal mastermind rather than a desperate woman who'd been systematically manipulated for years. Instead, I tell the truth in a way that Prosecutor Rodriguez clearly doesn't expect. Yes, Clara was under enormous pressure. Yes, she was manipulated by our father who groomed her specifically because she'd be easy to control. Yes, she made terrible choices, but she made them while being exploited by someone she trusted, someone who should have protected her, but instead used her as a tool for his own crimes. Rodriguez looks increasingly frustrated as I testify, and I can see her trying to redirect my answers toward criminal intent rather than victimization. But I've made my decision. My father turned Clara into his puppet and his scapegoat. I won't let him turn her into his final victim by allowing the legal system to punish her with the full force she probably deserves while he escapes scrutiny. The plea deal comes together over the following week. 6 months in county jail with time already served counting toward the sentence, 500 hours of community service, 5 years of probation, and a permanent ban from holding corporate officer positions in any public company. It's lenient given the charges, and I know it's only possible because of how I testified. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Patricia Morrison accepts the plea but looks directly at Clara with an expression that's stern but not unkind. Ms. James, you're receiving leniency primarily because of your sister's testimony and my assessment that you were manipulated by someone who should have protected you. I suggest you reflect deeply on who your real family is and who your enemies are. Don't confuse the two again. Clara standing in an Orange County jail jumpsuit that makes her look younger and more vulnerable than I've ever seen her nods without speaking. Her eyes find mine across the courtroom and I see gratitude there, and shame, and something that might be the beginning of understanding. As I leave the courthouse, threading through the reporters and cameras that have made this case a local news sensation, a man in a dark suit approaches me. He's tall, probably in his 50s, with the kind of careful, neutral expression that screams federal law enforcement. Ms. James, he says, showing me a badge. I'm Special Agent David Park with the FBI. We'd like to talk to you about your father. Agent Park leads me to a quiet conference room in the federal building downtown, and over the next 3 hours I learn that the FBI's white-collar crime division has been investigating James and Compte for 6 months. The investigation started when unusual financial patterns flagged in their monitoring systems patterns that aligned almost exactly with the fraudulent transactions Ethan had already discovered. Combined with the evidence we'd gathered, the documents Clara unknowingly signed, and now the arson attempt that suggested someone was desperate to destroy records they had enough for search warrants. The raids happened simultaneously the next morning. Federal agents hit my father's home office while he's still drinking his coffee, and another team descends on his private office at the company headquarters. I watch the news coverage from my apartment, seeing agents carrying boxes of files and computers out of places my father thought were secure, untouchable. They seize everything: hard drives, file cabinets, the personal laptop he thought was encrypted beyond anyone's ability to crack. What they find is even more damning than I expected. Documents directly connecting my father to every shell company used in the embezzlement scheme. Bank records showing he personally received funds from those fraudulent transactions. Email chains discussing the Chinese merger deal, including his $25 million advisory fee. But the most chilling discovery comes from encrypted emails that the FBI's cyber forensics team manages to decrypt within days. Need to deal with the Melissa situation before she causes real problems. One email reads sent to an unknown recipient 8 months ago. Another sent just weeks before my grandfather's death, 15 years earlier, says simply, "The old man knows too much. This needs to be resolved quickly." When Agent Park shows me these emails in a subsequent meeting, I feel physically ill. My father wasn't just stealing from the company or manipulating his daughters. He was actively planning to eliminate anyone who threatened his control, and that included both me and my grandfather. The arsenic forensic report becomes the cornerstone of something I never expected: a murder investigation. The FBI reopens my grandfather's death as a potential homicide, and suddenly detectives are interviewing everyone who knew him during those final months. His former doctor, Dr. Richard Chen, admits in a formal statement that he always thought the decline seemed inconsistent with typical heart disease progression, but had no reason to suspect foul play at the time. The pharmacy records Agent Park's team subpoenas reveal something that makes the circumstantial case significantly stronger. 15 years ago, my father briefly owned a pest control business, officially registered for managing his vacation property in the mountains. The business lasted less than a year and seemed like an odd vanity project at the time. But pest control businesses have legal access to various poisons, including arsenic-based compounds. The timing of this business coincides almost exactly with the 6-month period when my grandfather was being poisoned. The arrest happens on a Thursday afternoon at my father's golf club, where he's apparently been spending most of his time since the FBI raids, probably thinking that maintaining his normal routine makes him look innocent. Federal agents walk onto the 18th green in front of his regular foursome, in front of the club members, having lunch on the terrace in front of everyone who's known him as a successful businessman and pillar of the community. The charges are read clearly enough that I can hear them on the news coverage later: wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and first-degree murder. The murder charge is based on the arsenic evidence, the pharmacy records witness testimony about his motive and opportunity, and those encrypted emails that suggest premeditation. His lawyers immediately request bail, arguing that he's a longtime community member with no criminal record and no reason to flee. But Agent Park has prepared for this. He presents evidence of my father's offshore accounts, his connections to international business entities, and his documented history of manipulation and deception. The federal magistrate denies bail, citing flight risk and the seriousness of the murder charge. For the first time in his life, my father has no power, no control, no ability to manipulate the situation or the people around him. He'll await trial in federal detention, and no amount of money or connections can change that. I watch the evening news coverage showing my father in handcuffs being led into the federal courthouse, and I think about everything he destroyed in pursuit of control and wealth. My grandfather's life, Clara's future, my career and reputation, our family's integrity, the company my grandfather built with honest work. And I realize something that feels like peace settling over me for the first time in months. This isn't revenge. This is justice. Finally, my father's arrest brings a sense of justice, but it doesn't bring closure. There's still one relationship that needs resolution, one person I need to face before I can truly move forward. 2 days after my father is denied bail, I drive to the county jail to visit Clara. The visiting area is depressing, in the way all institutional spaces are, with its scratched plexiglass partitions and metal stools bolted to the floor and fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look sick. When they bring Clara out, I barely recognize her. She's wearing an Orange County jail uniform that hangs loose on her frame, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail with no styling, her face completely bare of the makeup she used to apply so carefully every morning. She looks younger somehow, more like the little sister I remember from childhood than the polished, ambitious woman who announced my firing at Thanksgiving dinner. She sits down on the other side of the glass partition and picks up the phone. For a long moment, neither of us speaks. Then Clara's composure cracks and she starts crying, not the delicate tears she used to produce when she wanted sympathy, but deep, wrenching sobs that shake her whole body. "I hate him," she says when she can finally speak. I hate Dad so much. I thought he loved me, Melissa. I really believed that. I thought he saw something special in me, that he believed I could actually lead the company. She wipes her face with the back of her hand. But I was just useful to him. That's all either of us ever were. When you were useful, he used you to build the company and manage the finances. When you became inconvenient because you actually understood what was happening, he tried to destroy you. And when he needed a puppet CEO who wouldn't ask questions, he used me. I feel my own throat tighten with emotion I wasn't prepared for. Clara. I knew what I was doing at Thanksgiving was cruel. She interrupts, needing to get this out. When I announced you were being fired in front of everyone, I knew it was a terrible thing to do. I told myself I deserved the CEO position, that I'd earned it somehow, that you'd had your chance, and now it was my turn. But that was all lies, I told myself, because the truth was too hard to face. The truth was that I didn't deserve it, and Dad chose me specifically because I was weak enough to control. She looks at me through the scratched plexiglass, and I see something in her eyes I've never seen before. Genuine humility, real remorse, the kind that comes from truly understanding what you've done wrong. Neither of us deserved what he did to us, she says quietly. I'm so sorry for my part in it. I'm so sorry for everything. I want to say something, but Clara shakes her head and reaches into her pocket. She pulls out a small USB drive and signals to the guard that she wants to use the property exchange slot, the small metal drawer that allows items to pass through the partition. The guard checks it, nods, and Clara places it in the drawer. I retrieve it from my side. I started recording Dad about 6 months ago. Clara explains, her voice dropping even though we're speaking through phones and nobody else can hear. After you left and things started falling apart, I realized he was hiding things from me. So I turned on my phone's voice recorder every time we talked. I have everything, Melissa. Hours of recordings. Him coaching me to sign documents I didn't understand. Him threatening me when I asked too many questions. Him discussing the Chinese merger and his plans to sell the company. She pauses, and fresh tears start streaming down her face. There's one recording from about 6 months before Grandfather died. I was going through old files on my computer last week trying to find something for my lawyer, and I found it. Dad is on the phone with someone, and he says, "The old man's getting suspicious about the finances. We need to handle this before he changes his will and cuts me out completely." I didn't understand what it meant when I recorded it. I thought he was just talking about business strategy, but now knowing what he did, knowing about the arsenic... She can't finish the sentence. I stare at the USB drive in my hand, this small piece of plastic that contains evidence of premeditated murder. Clara, this could change everything. This could be the difference between circumstantial evidence and proof. I know, she says, and I want you to have it. Not for my lawyer, not to reduce my sentence. I want you to give it to the FBI. What Dad did was so much worse than what I did. I signed some papers I shouldn't have and tried to burn down a warehouse in a moment of panic. He murdered Grandfather. He manipulated both of us for years. He tried to destroy you and use me as his puppet. He deserves to pay for all of it. I look at my sister, really look at her, and I see someone who's finally taking responsibility for her choices while also recognizing that she was victimized too. The sister who fired me is gone. This person sitting across from me, broken and humiliated, but finally honest, is someone I can possibly forgive. This evidence could reduce your sentence if we gave it to your lawyer, I say carefully. Are you sure you want me to give it to the FBI instead? Clara nods firmly. I deserve what's happening to me. I made my choices even if I didn't fully understand them. But Dad needs to be stopped, and if this helps do that, then it's worth it. I just needed you to know that I'm not him. I'm not going to protect him anymore. And I'm sorry. For everything. For all of it. For the first time in our adult lives, I reach up and press my hand flat against the glass partition. Clara mirrors the gesture immediately, placing her hand on the other side, so our palms align through the barrier. It's not a real touch, not a real embrace, but it's something. It's a start. I forgive you, I say, and I mean it. Not because what you did was okay, but because I understand now that you were being used just like I was. We were both his victims. The visiting time ends too soon. As I leave the jail, I clutch the USB drive in my hand like it's something precious, because in a way it is. It's my sister choosing truth over loyalty, justice over self-preservation, me over our father. I sit in my car in the parking lot and plug the USB drive into my laptop. There are dozens of audio files, each one labeled with dates. I click on the oldest one, the recording Clara mentioned, dated 15 years ago. My father's voice fills the car, younger but unmistakably his. "The old man's getting suspicious about the finances. We need to handle this before he changes his will. I've already made arrangements. It'll look like natural causes. No one will question it." A second voice, one I don't recognize, responds, "And if it doesn't work?" "It'll work," my father says with absolute confidence. "Trust me, in 6 months, this problem will be solved, and we'll finally have full control." I sit in that parking lot for a long time, listening to my father plan murder in his own words, and I feel the last piece of doubt disappear. Then, I call Agent Park. Clara's recordings provide the FBI with exactly what they need to strengthen the murder case against my father, and Agent Park tells me the evidence has fundamentally changed the prosecution's strategy. But while my father awaits trial and Clara serves her sentence, I have a company to rebuild and a legacy to restore. 3 weeks after my father's arrest, I call a company-wide meeting to formally accept the permanent CEO position and lay out my vision for what James & Company will become. The auditorium is packed with employees, many of whom I haven't seen since the day I packed up my office. I look out at their faces and see hope mixed with skepticism. People who want to believe things will get better, but have been disappointed too many times to trust easily. I understand that feeling completely. I'm not here to claim victory or settle scores. I begin, my voice steady, despite the nerves fluttering in my stomach. I'm here to fix what's broken, and not just in the company's finances or operations. I'm here to fix the culture, the ethics, the fundamental approach to how we do business, and how we treat the people who make this company work. I announce an immediate external audit of all company accounts, complete transparency with shareholders about the fraud and embezzlement, and a commitment to operating with integrity, even when it's harder or less profitable than cutting corners. But the announcement that gets the strongest reaction is when I tell them about the 400 workers Clara terminated. Every single person who lost their job during the past 6 months will receive a letter this week offering reinstatement at their previous salary plus back pay for the time they were unemployed. I say, you lost your jobs because of family politics and bad leadership decisions that had nothing to do with your performance or value. That was wrong, and I'm making it right. The applause starts slowly, then builds until nearly everyone in the auditorium is standing, and I have to blink back tears because this is what winning should feel like. Not the boardroom victory or the courtroom vindication, but this moment when people who were hurt are being told they matter. Over the following months, I implement changes that would have been impossible under my father's leadership or Clara's tenure. The merger of James & Company and Clarity Industries happens formally, creating a stronger combined entity without the exploitation that characterized my supply chain strategy during the conflict. I renegotiate every contract to ensure fair terms for both parties, even when it means we make slightly less profit. I establish an employee board seat, giving workers actual voting power on major company decisions. I create financial reporting systems that are transparent and accessible to every stakeholder, from the largest shareholder to the newest warehouse employee. The most radical change, and the one that my lawyers try hardest to talk me out of, is converting 15% of my personal equity into an employee stock ownership plan. Every worker, from executives to entry-level employees, receives shares based on their tenure and contribution. It reduces my ownership stake significantly, but it also means that everyone who works here has a genuine stake in the company's success. You're giving away millions of dollars in equity, my financial advisor says, looking at me like I've lost my mind. No, I correct him. I'm investing it in the people who actually create value. My grandfather built this company with his hands and his mind. These employees build it now with their work and their dedication. They deserve to own part of what they're creating. But the change I'm most proud of, the legacy that feels most aligned with what my grandfather would have wanted, is the Clarity Foundation. I use the remaining funds from the trust money that could have made me personally wealthy beyond anything I'd need to establish a nonprofit dedicated to helping displaced workers over 50 restart their careers or launch small businesses. It's a demographic that gets overlooked constantly, people who are too young to retire but too old to be easily employable in an economy that worships youth. The foundation's first beneficiaries are the 400 workers Clara fired. We host a launch event at a downtown hotel, and I stand in front of people whose lives were upended by my family's dysfunction, and I tell them the truth. You lost your jobs because of family politics, because of power struggles that had nothing to do with your value or your contributions. That was profoundly wrong. This foundation is my attempt to make it right, not just with money, but with opportunity. We're going to help you rebuild, whether that means returning to work here or starting something new. You deserved better than what happened to you, and I'm committed to helping you get it. The foundation quickly becomes more important to me than the company itself. The company is business numbers, operations strategy. The foundation is people, second chances, dignity restored. It's the difference between revenge and redemption, between winning and actually making things better. At the foundation's official launch event 3 months later, with press coverage and speeches from board members and testimonials from workers whose lives have been changed, Ethan finds me standing alone on the terrace overlooking the city. He's been by my side through all of this, and somewhere during the past months, the old hurt between us has transformed into something that might be the foundation for something new. "You've won everything," he says quietly. "The company, justice for your grandfather, respect from everyone who matters, the ability to actually make a difference. What's next?" I look out at the city lights and think about that question. 6 months ago, I would have said that reclaiming the company was the end point, the goal that everything else served. But now I understand that it was just the beginning. I don't know, I admit, but whatever it is, I want it to matter more than winning did. Ethan's question about what comes next stays with me for days, echoing through my thoughts as I run board meetings and review foundation applications and slowly rebuild what my father tried to destroy. The answer comes to me gradually, not in a single moment of clarity, but through a series of small realizations that add up to a truth I wasn't expecting. I call a board meeting 6 months after taking the CEO position permanently, and what I announce surprises everyone in the room, including Raymond, who's become my closest advisor and strongest supporter. I'll be transitioning from CEO to board chair within 2 years, I say, watching their faces register shock and confusion. During that time, we'll conduct a comprehensive search for an external CEO with proven operational experience and a track record of ethical leadership. The questions come immediately. Why would I step down when I've just won the company back? Don't I want to lead the transformation I've started? Am I planning to leave entirely? I didn't fight for this company so I could become another family tyrant hoarding power until I'm too old to let go. I explain, and I see Raymond nod in understanding. I fought for it so it could become what it should have been all along, a place where merit determines leadership, where people are valued over politics, where the company serves something larger than the ego of whoever happens to be in charge. I tell them about my plans to focus on governance as board chair, to dedicate more time to the Clarity Foundation, to ensure that the company has professional management that isn't tangled up in family dynamics and personal history. This isn't defeat, and it isn't exhaustion. It's intentional. It's me refusing to repeat the cycle that destroyed my family, the cycle where power becomes an end in itself, rather than a means to something better. My grandfather held power until the day he died, and it made him vulnerable to my father's ambition. I say quietly, I won't make that mistake. This company needs to outlive all of us, and that means building systems that don't depend on any one person's control. The board approves my plan, though I can see the concern in some faces, the worry that I'm giving up too soon, or walking away from responsibility. But Raymond understands, and after the meeting he pulls me aside and tells me that my grandfather would be proud, not because I won, but because I'm wise enough to know when winning should end. That evening, I meet Ethan at the small Italian restaurant where he proposed to me 5 years ago, back when I was a different person living a different life. We order wine and pasta, and for a while we just sit in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people have been through something transformative together. When this started, I wanted revenge. I finally admit saying out loud what I've been thinking for weeks. I wanted them to hurt the way they hurt me, Clara, my father, even my mother, for all those years of favoritism and silence. And for a while, watching it all unfold, it felt good. Watching Clara fail as CEO, exposing my father, winning every battle. It felt like justice. Ethan listens without interrupting the way he always has, the quality that made me fall in love with him years ago before I was smart enough to choose him over duty. But my grandfather was right. I continue pulling out the letter he left me, the one about mercy and power and not letting revenge hollow me out. Revenge is empty. It doesn't heal anything. It doesn't restore what was broken. It just spreads the pain around until everyone's equally hurt and calling it justice. I show Ethan the specific passage my grandfather underlined. Forgiveness is the final proof of power. We sit with those words for a moment, and I watch understanding dawn across his face. I used to think forgiveness was weakness, I say. I thought it meant letting people get away with hurting you, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But that's not what Grandpa meant. He meant that anyone can destroy. Anyone can take revenge when they're hurt. But building something better than what was broken, choosing to heal instead of harm, creating rather than demolishing, that takes real strength. That's the kind of power that actually matters. Ethan reaches across the table and takes my hand, and I see in his eyes something I haven't allowed myself to hope for. Not just love, but respect for who I've become through this ordeal. Not the woman he fell in love with 5 years ago, who was capable but trapped by duty and family obligation. The woman I am now, who fought her way through betrayal and came out the other side choosing mercy over vengeance. The next morning, a letter arrives at my office forwarded from Barrett and Associates. The postmark is smudged but appears to be from overseas, and there's no return address. Inside is a single piece of paper, yellowed slightly with age, covered in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. The date at the top reads 2 weeks before his death. My hands shake as I read it. Melissa, if you're reading this, you've probably discovered what your father is. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from that. I tried in my own way by setting up the trust and the bylaws and all the mechanisms I hoped would preserve what I built. But mechanisms aren't enough if the people using them don't have the right character. The handwriting gets shakier here, as if he was already feeling the effects of the poison, though he didn't know what was causing his decline. Remember something important. The measure of character isn't whether we're betrayed. Betrayal happens to everyone eventually. The measure of character is how we respond to that betrayal. Do we become as cruel as those who hurt us? Do we let their poison infect us until we're just as toxic? Or do we choose to be better than they were even when being better is harder? The final paragraph is underlined, twice emphasized so heavily the pen nearly tore through the paper. Win with honor, Melissa, or the victory isn't worth having. Win with mercy, or you'll lose yourself in the process. Win with the understanding that how you win matters more than whether you win. I built this company with too much ruthlessness and not enough compassion. Don't repeat my mistakes. Be better than I was. I read the letter 3 times, then carefully tape it to my office wall next to my degrees and awards and the photo of my grandfather from his company's founding. It becomes my touchstone, my reminder of why I fought and why I need to stop fighting now. Ethan comes to my office that afternoon and finds me staring at the letter. He reads it over my shoulder, then asks the question that's been hanging between us for months. So, was this your revenge? All of it? The company, the foundation, Clara's arrest, your father facing murder charges. Was it revenge? I think about that question seriously because he deserves a serious answer. I think about the fake investor and the supply chain traps, and the surveillance and all the calculated moves I made to destroy Clara's credibility. I think about the satisfaction I felt watching her fail, the cold pleasure of winning each battle. But then I think about posting her bail, about testifying at her hearing in a way that gave her a chance at redemption, about the foundation that's helping people Clara hurt, about choosing to step back from power instead of clinging to it the way my father and grandfather did. No. I finally say, and I mean it. This was my release. Release from the belief that I had to prove something to them. Release from the idea that their approval or their fear mattered. Release from the cycle of betrayal and revenge that's poisoned my family for generations. I look at Ethan, and I see my future standing there, the life I could have had 5 years ago if I'd been brave enough to choose it. I'm done fighting, I tell him. I'm ready to start building instead. 1 year after I reclaimed leadership of the company, I'm sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Raymond knocks on my door. He's holding a copy of the business journal, and he's smiling in a way that tells me something good is inside. Thought you might want to see this, he says, handing me the magazine open to a feature article titled, From Crisis to Case Study, How James Clarity Corp. Rebuilt After Family Betrayal. The merger of James & Company and Clarity Industries is now complete, the combined entity operating under the name James Clarity Corp., as a tribute to both my grandfather's legacy and the new direction we're building. The numbers in the article are better than I dared hope. Revenue up 34%. Year-over-year employee satisfaction scores the highest in company history, client retention at 97%. But what makes me proudest are the quotes from employees about feeling valued, about having ownership in their work, both literally through the stock program and figuratively through having actual input into company decisions. Your grandfather would be proud, Raymond says, settling into the chair across from my desk. Not because you won the company back, though, that took considerable skill and courage, but because of what you did with winning. You could have used this victory to build your own empire to become exactly what your father was. Instead, you're building something that might actually last beyond any of us. The business press has started featuring James Clarity Corp. as a case study in ethical restructuring after crisis, and I've been invited to speak at conferences about corporate governance and stakeholder capitalism. It's strange being held up as an example when I still feel like I'm figuring things out. But Raymond assures me that uncertainty is a better foundation for leadership than the false certainty my father always projected. The company's transformation is the most visible change, but it's not the most meaningful one. That honor belongs to what's happening with Clara. She completed her 6-month jail sentence 3 months ago, finished her community service hours working with a homeless shelter downtown, and is now employed at the Clarity Foundation. Not in leadership, not in some honorary position created to save face, but as a case manager helping displaced workers navigate job training programs and small business loan applications. It's humble work, the kind of behind-the-scenes service that doesn't come with press releases or recognition. But Clara is genuinely good at it. I visit the foundation office one afternoon and watch her working with a 56-year-old former factory supervisor named Marcus who lost his job when his plant closed. Clara sits across from him reviewing his business plan for a small electrical contracting company, and I see something in her I never saw when she was CEO, genuine empathy. She understands what it feels like to lose everything because she lived it. She knows the shame of having to start over because she's doing it herself. After Marcus leaves, Clara and I have our first real conversation in months, sitting in her small office surrounded by training manuals and loan application forms. I spent 30 years trying to be someone I wasn't, she tells me, her voice quiet but steady. Trying to be you because you were smart and capable and everyone respected you. Trying to be what Dad wanted because I thought his approval would make me matter. Trying to prove I deserved to be taken seriously. But I was never any of those people. I was just Clara, and I was so busy trying to be someone else that I never figured out if Clara was actually worth being. She looks at me with eyes that are clear and honest, in a way they never were before. Now I'm just me. I help people fill out forms. I explain loan requirements. I connect displaced workers with training programs. It's not glamorous and nobody's writing articles about me, but I'm good at it. And for the first time in my life, that's enough. I see genuine peace in my sister's face, and I realize that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't forgiveness or even a second chance. Sometimes it's just creating space for them to become who they actually are, instead of who they thought they needed to be. My father's fate is less redemptive, but entirely deserved. His trial lasted 6 weeks, and the jury convicted him on multiple counts: embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and manslaughter. The murder charge was reduced because the prosecution had difficulty proving premeditation beyond reasonable doubt, but the arsenic evidence was compelling enough to establish that he deliberately caused my grandfather's death. The judge sentenced him to 22 years in federal prison. He's 56 now. He'll be 78 when he's eligible for parole, assuming he lives that long. The family estate was seized and sold to pay restitution to defrauded investors and cover legal fees. My mother filed for divorce before the trial even ended, and she now lives in a small condo near the lake, attending therapy twice a week and slowly, carefully rebuilding relationships with both Clara and me. Some wounds heal. Some just become scars we learn to live with. My mother's complicity in my grandfather's death. Her years of silence about my father's crimes. Her favoritism that damaged both her daughters. These aren't things that disappear with apologies or therapy, but she's trying, and I've learned that sometimes trying is the most we can ask of people who've spent decades making the wrong choices. I'm reviewing foundation applications one afternoon when an email arrives from an address I don't recognize. The subject line simply says, "Thank you." And when I open it, I find a message that makes everything I've been through feel worth it. Ms. James, my name is Robert Chen. You don't know me, but 18 months ago your sister fired me from a warehouse supervisor position I'd held for 12 years. I was 54 years old and I thought my working life was over. Then the Clarity Foundation gave me a small business grant and connected me with a mentor who helped me start a logistics consulting firm. Last month, I hired my 3rd employee. I'm writing to tell you that you changed my life and to thank you for turning your family's betrayal into something that helps people like me. You could have just taken your company back and called it justice. Instead, you built something that matters. Thank you. I read the email 3 times and then I forwarded it to Clara with a simple note: "This is why we do the work." Her response comes back 2 minutes later. "This is why it was all worth it." Robert Chen's email is the first of many, but a week later I receive one that affects me more deeply than all the others combined. It arrives on a Tuesday morning when I'm reviewing budget proposals for the foundation's expansion, and the subject line is simple: "You gave me my life back." The sender is Margaret Chen, a name I don't immediately recognize, but as I read her message, I remember the spreadsheet of terminated employees, that Clara signed the list of 400 people whose livelihoods were sacrificed for cost savings that were never really about saving the company, and always about my father's manipulation. "Ms. James," the email begins, "You don't know me, but I worked in your company's shipping department for 19 years. I started there when I was 35, right after my youngest child started school, and it became more than just a job. It was my identity, my community, my purpose. When I was terminated at 54 years old, I felt like my working life was over. I was too young to retire, too old for most companies to even consider hiring. The rejection letters all had the same polite language about pursuing other candidates, but what they meant was that nobody wanted to invest in training someone my age." I keep reading, my throat tightening with each sentence. My husband was fighting colon cancer at the time. Losing my job meant losing our health insurance right when we needed it most. We burned through our savings paying for his treatments. We almost lost our house. I took whatever work I could find. Retail jobs, cleaning houses, anything that would bring in money, but it was never enough. I stopped sleeping. I stopped believing things could get better. I thought my life was effectively over, that everything I'd worked for was gone and there was no way back. The email continues, and I have to pause to wipe my eyes because I can see Margaret so clearly now, not as a name on a spreadsheet, but as a real person whose life was upended by decisions she had no control over. Then the Clarity Foundation reached out. At first I thought it was a mistake or some kind of scam, because why would anyone want to help me? But your case manager, a woman named Clara James, sat with me for 2 hours and helped me see that I wasn't finished. She helped me remember that I'd always loved cooking, that people had been telling me for years I should cater events. She walked me through applying for a small business grant, connected me with a mentor who taught me about licensing and insurance, and believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. I stopped reading and just sit with that for a moment. Clara helped this woman. My sister working quietly at the foundation made this difference in someone's life. It's been 8 months since I started Chen's Catering, Margaret writes. I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm thriving. I have regular clients. I hired my first employee last month. My husband is in remission. We saved our house. But more than any of that, you gave me back my dignity. You gave me back the belief that I still have value, that my years of experience and my skills and my work ethic still matter. I'm writing to say thank you and to tell you that you changed my life. You didn't have to help us. You could have just taken your company back and called it justice. But you did something harder and more important. You built something that heals. I read the email 3 times, and by the 3rd time I'm crying openly, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization of what we've actually accomplished. This is what victory looks like. Not the boardroom confrontation where I reclaimed the CEO position. Not my father in federal prison. Not even the company's financial recovery and ethical transformation. Victory is Margaret Chen at 55 starting a catering business and thriving. Victory is 400 families who have income and hope again. Victory is my sister finding purpose in humble work that helps people. Victory is turning the worst thing that ever happened to me into something that makes other people's lives better. I print Margaret's email and take it to a frame shop during my lunch break. When I return, I hang it on my office wall next to my grandfather's letter about winning with honor. These 2 pieces of paper, more than any award or recognition or business achievement, represent what matters. These are the things worth fighting for. That evening, Ethan picks me up at 6 o'clock and drives us to Salvatore's, the small Italian restaurant we used to go to when we were young colleagues falling in love before duty and family obligation complicated everything. The owner, an elderly man named Sal, who still works the front of house every night, remembers us and gives us the corner table by the window, the one we always preferred. We order wine and the pasta dishes we used to share, and for a while we just enjoy the comfort of being together without crisis or strategy or planning defining every moment. Then Ethan sets down his fork and looks at me with an expression I can't quite read. 5 years ago, he says quietly, I asked you to marry me. We were sitting at this exact table and I had the whole speech prepared about building a life together, about choosing each other over everything else. And you said no. I feel my chest tighten with old regret. Ethan, let me finish, he says gently. You said no because you couldn't leave the company when your family needed you, when you felt responsible for holding everything together. I was hurt, and I left and we didn't speak for 2 years. But I understood even then that you were choosing duty over love because that's who you are. That's part of why I loved you. He reaches across the table and takes my hand. You've saved the company now. You've exposed the fraud, removed the people who were destroying it, rebuilt it into something your grandfather would actually be proud of. You've done everything you said you needed to do. So I'm asking again, Melissa. Not because I'm trying to claim you or possess you or make you choose between me and anything else, but because I love you. Because I've loved you for 7 years through everything. Because I think we've both waited long enough. I look at this man who proposed to me once before, who walked away when I chose obligation over happiness, who came back when I needed him and helped me through the darkest period of my life without asking for anything in return. And I realize that for the first time since my grandfather died, I'm free to choose what I want rather than what I think I should do. Yes, I say, and my voice doesn't shake at all. Yes, I'll marry you. Let's start something that isn't about fixing broken things or fighting battles or proving anything to anyone. Let's just build something good. Ethan's smile is like sunrise, and he reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a small velvet box that looks worn at the edges like it's been carried and held and waiting for a long time. "One more thing," he says. "I've been carrying this ring for 5 years. I never stopped believing we'd get here. The ring Ethan has been carrying for 5 years fits perfectly, and we set a wedding date for the spring. But before that, there's one more milestone I need to mark, one more circle I need to close." Thanksgiving arrives again 1 year and 3 weeks since the night Clara stood up in our family's estate and announced my termination like it was something to celebrate. This Thanksgiving is different in every way that matters. We gather in my house, the one I bought 6 months ago, with money from my salary rather than family wealth. It's smaller than the estate, cozier, filled with furniture I chose myself rather than inherited. The dining room table seats 8 comfortably, and tonight every seat is filled with people who earned their place through loyalty and love rather than blood obligation. Ethan sits beside me, his hand resting on mine when he thinks I need the touch. Clara arrives carrying a homemade pumpkin pie, her first attempt at baking anything, and she's so nervous about whether it turned out okay that I have to reassure her 3 times that it looks perfect. My mother comes quietly dressed, simply looking older, but somehow lighter than she did a year ago, as if divorce and therapy and honesty have lifted weight she'd been carrying for decades. Raymond is here because he's become family in ways that matter more than genetics. And Margaret Chen sits across from me with her husband David, both of them glowing with the kind of contentment that comes from surviving something terrible and finding joy on the other side. There's one empty place setting at the table positioned at the head where my grandfather would have sat. A small card beside the plate reads simply, "For those who couldn't be here." Nobody mentions my father. Some absences are necessary for healing, and his absence is the foundation that allows the rest of us to begin rebuilding. Before we eat, Clara stands up, and for a moment I see her exactly as she was a year ago, standing at our parents' table announcing my firing with cold triumph. But when she speaks now, everything is different. A year ago, I stood up at a dinner like this and said terrible things. She begins, her voice shaking but steady. I was cruel because I thought power made me important, because I believed that winning meant something if I could just climb high enough. I was wrong about everything. She looks directly at me, and I see tears in her eyes that are real and earned. "Melissa, you had every reason to destroy me completely. You could have. You had the power and the justification and probably even the right. Instead, you posted my bail. You testified at my hearing in a way that gave me a chance. You gave me a job at the foundation where I could do something meaningful instead of just serving time and disappearing. You gave me the opportunity to become someone better than who I was." Her voice breaks completely now. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that, but I'm grateful for it every single day." She raises her glass, and we all follow. To second chances. To becoming people our grandfather would actually be proud of. To families we choose, and families we rebuild. We drink together, and I reach across the table to squeeze Clara's hand. She squeezes back, and in that moment, I know we're going to be okay. Not perfect, not without scars, but okay. Dinner is loud and warm and full of laughter, the kind of meal where people talk over each other and pass dishes and tell stories that get more exaggerated with each retelling. This is what Thanksgiving was supposed to be all along, before power and favoritism and my father's ambition poisoned everything. After dinner, I step out onto the back porch, needing a moment of quiet to process everything. The November air is cold and clear, and I can see stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Ethan finds me there a few minutes later and wraps a blanket around my shoulders, then stands beside me in comfortable silence. "Are you happy?" he finally asks. I think about that question seriously because it deserves a serious answer. A year ago, I was fired, humiliated, betrayed by everyone I thought I could trust. Now I have the company back, transformed into something ethical and sustainable. I have the foundation helping hundreds of people rebuild their lives. I have my sister back not as a rival, but as someone I'm learning to love again. I have justice for my grandfather and accountability for my father's crimes. I have this man beside me who waited 5 years and never stopped believing we'd find our way back to each other. But more than any of those victories, more than any of those accomplishments, I have peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing I fought with honor, that I won without becoming what I was fighting against, that I chose mercy when revenge would have been easier. Yes, I say, and I mean it completely. I'm happy. Not because I won, but because I stopped needing to win. Through the window, I can see the empty chair at the head of the table, my grandfather's place, and I whisper words meant only for him. Sometimes the sweetest victory is never needing to win. Ethan pulls me close, and we stand together watching the stars for another moment before returning inside. Through the glass, I see my chosen family laughing together, Clara helping Margaret clear plates, while Raymond tells some story that has my mother actually smiling, and I understand that this is what my grandfather wanted all along. Not perfection, not dominance, just people caring for each other with honesty and grace. I close the door behind us, and the warmth and laughter fold around me like an embrace, proof that some things broken can be rebuilt better than before. And that's the story of Melissa, a woman who transformed betrayal into an opportunity for rebirth. She didn't just reclaim her company, she built a genuine legacy where compassion and justice triumphed over revenge. From that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner to the day she stood surrounded by her new family, the family she chose, Melissa, proved that true victory isn't about defeating your enemies, but about no longer needing to win at all. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories about resilience, forgiveness, and redemption. We want to hear from you. Do you think Melissa was right to forgive Clara? If you were in her position, how would you have handled the situation? Leave your comments below and share your thoughts with us. Every opinion you share helps us create more meaningful content. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear a message about choosing healing over revenge. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end. Your support means everything.